sea-haunted wind drifted through the narrow canals of Braavos, carrying the faint brine and tar perfume that marked the city even more surely than its maze of bridges. Dawn had not yet cracked the purple sky, but the house of black and white already breathed with restless life. Down in the silent vaults where candles guttered before statues of 100 forgotten gods, a girl who had once been Arya of House Stark knelt barefoot on cold marble. She counted her heartbeats and tried to forget each name they once echoed. Needle, Winterfell, Jon Dot. They were bones now, she told herself, scattered on a wolf's grave. The many-faced god asked for emptiness, and she offered everything but the spark that refused to die behind her ribs. The kindly man's staff rapped once upon the stones. "It is time." His voice was soft as dust, yet it carried through the chamber like a bell. She rose, feeling the ache in thighs and calves from yesterday's drills with the waif. 500 steps across Braavos blindfolded, 500 more back, balancing jugs of seawater that sloshed and salted her skin. She had made it, though the waif had cut invisible paths before her, tripping her at corner turns. A girl must see without eyes, the waif had whispered afterward, lips brushing Arya's ear like a moth's wing. Now Arya traced the staff's retreating sound. She moved barefoot through cloistered halls, passing faces, some leathered and shriveled, some young, all dead, mounted in the dimness like masks waiting for carnival. The air was cool and smelled faintly of cloves burned to mask decay. At a fork she paused. The kindly man already vanished, but another figure lingered. The waif again, clad in linen gray as mist. "Not a girl today," the waif said. "Ah, Yoyun, a shadow." Arya's fingers twitched as though longing for Needle's familiar balance. But the sword lay hidden beneath a loose board in her cell, like a secret defiance. "Shadows have no names," she answered. The waif smiled, and Arya's own face stared back at her. It had taken the waif 10 heartbeats to lift that likeness from the vault. Arya's gray eyes, the faint scar of old chickenpox near her chin. Even the streak of sun-kissed brown in her dark hair. Seeing herself worn by another felt like walking into a room to glimpse her own corpse propped on a chair. "Then let us see if the shadow can bleed," the waif said, and the staff whistled through the air. They fought in silence. No spectators, but the stone gods, and the hush of water far below. Arya counted the wife's breaths, the creak of ankle bones. She caught the first strike on her forearm, skin stinging, then slipped under the second and jabbed a knee into the wife's belly. The waif staggered, grinning through borrowed teeth. Their skirmish left red droplets across pale marble. But Arya's blood was her own. At last the kindly man returned, not hurrying, and raised a hand. "Enough. The many-faced god is sated by humility more than wounds." He studied Arya's split lip. "Pain has many voices. Listen to them." Later, Arya sat alone by a guttering candle, stitching torn flesh with nettle thread the waif provided. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts fluttered. The faces on the wall watched, a parliament of silence. She wondered what they had thought at the meeting of steel inside their skulls. At the instant they understood that everything, anger, hope, love, would soon dissolve like sugar in tea. Did they greet the god with relief or terror? She pressed the needle through skin and tried to swallow the taste of winter snow that filled her mouth. Days, or was it weeks? Time lost shape in that house, passed beneath the veiled roof. Arya brewed bitter teas for dying fishmongers, washed floors where city dust mingled with sacrificial ash, floated like a wraith through Braavos alleys, gathering secrets whispered by the desperate. Each night, the dream returned. Wolves howling across a frozen field, splashed red beneath a full moon. She would wake to the wife's soft laughter in the cot opposite. A girl dreams of wolves. Perhaps the wolf still thinks she has a name. One eve, the kindly man brought a cup and set it before Arya. The liquid within swirled black as pitch, though candlelight claimed no reflection upon it. "A gift," he said. Arya bowed her head. She knew this ritual. She had served the gift before. It was mercy in poison, a sip delivered to the suffering. But this cup waited for her lips. She raised it. inhaled the faint scent of olives crushed under steel, and hesitated. Somewhere beyond the walls, gulls cried above the Ragman harbor. She thought of Bran's laughter in the godswood, of Sansa's hair bright beneath sun. Her pulse quickened. "A girl is ready?" the kindly man asked. "A girl is no one," she answered. The words tasted of iron. She drank. At first there was only warmth, as though summer poured itself down her throat. Then cold blossomed outward from her heart, turning her limbs to brittle glass. The world blurred, edges fraying like damp parchment. She met the kindly man's eyes, but they were miles distant, and his voice slipped through thunder. Someone lowered her to the floor. She felt nothing beneath her, except an echo. The ceiling spiraled, black marble veined with starlight. Faces leaned over her, some familiar, some alien. The wife's lids fluttered. She wore Arya's features again, though distorted by concern or triumph. Arya could not decide. The beating in her chest slowed, each throb like a hammer falling deeper into night. Arya tried to remember the smell of pine sap, the weight of snowflakes on lashes, Joan's embrace at the top of the wall. But the memories slid away. She wondered whether the cup had contained death or transcendence, if the many-faced god now peeled her like an orange to reach the shining nothing within. Her last clear thought flickered bright. Needle beneath the floorboard, sleeping and sharp. Then everything fractured into silver motes. Darkness closed. Yet somewhere beyond the dark, another heartbeat began. It trembled first like a moth trapped in a jar, then steadied into rhythm. Lungs expanded, drawing the damp incense of the vault. Eyes opened. The body sat upright with a smooth, almost mechanical motion. Pale toes flexed against marble veined crimson from the earlier spar, but the feet bore no memory of pain. The waif stepped back, face impassive. The kindly man stood beside her, hands folded. "Rise," he commanded. Arya Stark, no, something wearing her, rose. The shift was perfect. The burn scar on her left hip, the faint roughness of quilting calluses on fingers, even the lilt in her breath when she suppressed a laugh. But her stare was too still, a pond frozen after first frost. "Who are you?" the kindly man asked. "No one," said the mouth that had once stammered prayers to the old gods. He offered a blade, dull steel, unremarkable. The figure accepted it, twirling with effortless grace. Memory transferred like ink pressed onto fresh parchment. The body moved as Arya moved, yet without the hitch of emotion. The waif pressed 2 fingers to the corpse cooling on the floor. The wolf is gone. The skin remains. A useful skin. The kindly man turned to the living copy. "Go to the canals. Find a boat bearing the sigil of a silver heron. The captain will ask for a name. Give him the one he expects." The figure nodded. She stepped over the husk of Arya Stark and vanished into shadow. Silent as mist. Outside, Braavos glittered beneath lantern glow. The Titan's distant bellow rolled across starlit water. The copy inhaled, calibrating voices, choosing which laugh belonged to which memory. She felt Arya's hunger for justice, her keen edge of rage, but they were inputs, not burdens. Tools. Died. A silver heron lifted on black sails at the dock. The captain hawked phlegm into the sea and squinted as the girl approached. "Thought you were dead," he said. Braavos whispers of poison in the house of black and white. She smiled with Arya's lopsided daring. "Dead girls swim better than the living, so they sent me." He spat again. "Name?" "Arya Stark." She savored the syllables like tasting foreign wine. "Off Winterfell." 2 days later, the ship slipped through the fingers. Dawn rose thin and pale across the Vale's jagged coast, and gulls wheeled overhead. The copy stood in the prow, hair whipped salt white, eyes scanning for horizons unseen. She carried no coin, no baggage, only the dull knife hidden in her sleeve, and a memory map of every man on her originals list. Cersei Lannister, Walder Frey, Meryn Trent. Some already slain, others still breathing. Each name gleamed like a doorway. Below deck lay a sailor named Cosimo, who touched girls too long when teaching knots. The copy visited in the hush before dawn and left him sleeping, veins pumped full of the gift. She whispered no prayer. Mercy wore a silent cloak. The narrow sea narrowed further, and rumors rode the waves. A war in the reach, dragons in the south, white shadows stalking beyond the wall. She weighed them with blank interest. The many-faced god cared nothing for wars of kings, but missions sprouted like weeds in battlefields. Death's ledger always balanced. At anchor near Gulltown, a raven fluttered down upon the railing, leg banded with a strip of black linen. The captain frowned, ill at ease with omens, but the girl coaxed the bird close. A single word stitched the cloth: return. She burned the message and watched ash swirl into water. Night brought rough waves and restless dreams, visions not her own. She saw a lone direwolf standing over a fresh grave beneath tower ruins. Snow fell, staining fur white. The beast lifted its muzzle and howled until the sky cracked. She woke with salt on her cheeks and wondered whose grief leaked through borrowed veins. The voyage south skirted storms. 6 sailors died when a mainmast line snapped. 3 slipped on slick decks, 1 vanished altogether. Each time, the captain's gaze lingered on his quiet passenger. But storms claimed sailors, and suspicion yielded to fear of omens. At Maidenpool, they took aboard a hedge knight heading north. He shared ale by the taffrail while the girl listened, eyes bright. He spoke of Lord Edmure's uncertain fate, of a Frey wedding washed in blood, of rumors that Winterfell was again a Stark seat. At this, her nostrils flared like a horse catching distant smoke. That night wine stilled. Gulls cried. The knight lay sprawled beside a coil of rope, neck twisted beyond repair. The captain found the girl cleaning her dull knife in the moonlit scupper. She looked up, expression as innocent as dawn. He slipped. The captain made the sign of Rhoynar prayer between twitching fingers. "What are you?" he breathed. "Storms have many faces," she answered, then walked away, boots tapping like raindrops. When the ship finally docked at White Harbor, snowflakes drifted soft as moth wings. She stepped onto the quay and inhaled the scent of pine and cold and smoke. It settled inside her as though a key had turned. Memories bloomed. Arya's first ride across winter fields. Robb's laughter as he hoisted her onto his shoulders. The chill bite of water when Bran dared her to wade the pool under the weirwood. They pulsed in her veins like northern lights. Yet they belonged to someone else, and she carried them the way a smith carries tools. Useful, but not his flesh. A merchant cart offered passage up the King's Road. She sat atop sacks of barley, eyes scanning snow-dusted trees. A child pointed at her long sleeves. "Wildlings burn," he whispered to his sister. "Look, her arms are scarred red." The girl smiled, tugging sleeve lower. They were not burn scars. They were the waif's staff kisses. Yet they served the same purpose. Reminders of what she was not. Night fell heavy in the inn at Mole's Town. She took a room beside the hearth and listened to travelers chatter about dark things rising beyond the wall. She considered the words, tasting possibilities. If ice demons marched, death would harvest southward soon enough. The many-faced god wove broad tapestries. In the small hours she felt a tug beneath her ribs, a coiling thread that led northward, past cold rivers and frost-clad firs, to a castle whose gray stones bled history. Winterfell. She spoke the name aloud, and its syllables rang with such longing that for a breath she feared the thread would drag her there like a hooked fish. But her orders were clear. King's Landing beckoned first, a carrion feast awaiting a wolf's shape. She turned south at dawn, leaving footprints that filled swiftly with fresh snow. Weeks drifted like leaves. She joined a ragged caravan of actors bound for the capital, their wagons laden with cracked drums and tattered costumes. They accepted her as mute stagehand. Each night by campfire, she watched them mime the contortions of history, King Robert's drunken boasts, Joffrey's shrill cruelty. Laughter rose, embers spiraled skyward. She studied timing, gesture, the subtle arch of brow, storing them in the vault of her mind. Faces are masks. Life itself, a mummer's play. On the road by Bitterbridge, 3 gold cloaks emerged from mist, demanding coin. The troop had none, and so offered flesh. The girl stepped forward. "Take mine," she said, voice small. One man seized her wrist, another grabbed her jaw. They found her eyes unsettling. Stone still, depthless. By dawn the cloaks were gone, throats bared ear to ear. The actors whispered prayers and crossed themselves when she passed. At last the city unfurled before her. King's Landing, sprawling and sour under autumn haze. The troop paid bribes to enter the mud gate, carts clattering over cobbles. The stench of tanneries and privy trenches mingled with roast onions. She tasted it on her tongue and thought, "Here is a place that forgets the faces of its dead faster than they cool." Within hours she rented a garret overlooking the street of silk. Below, pleasure houses blossomed red lanterns after dusk, petals of false warmth. She sat on the sill and watched the flow of men like ants. Somewhere, amid the hive, walked names on her list. Walder Frey dwelt far north, yet lesser Freys infested court. Circe sat upon iron thorns. Ilan Payne, mute as stone, haunted the keep. The girl separated each thread, and chose the easiest to pluck first. Seraph the Sweetling they called him, a knight of Blountgard, fond of girls half his age. She followed him 3 nights, memorizing his gait, the squeak of greaves against thigh plates, the way he lifted his visor to wink at barmaids. On the 4th night, she brushed past him at the quill and tankard, left a splinter of glass between the scaled joints beneath his right arm. Infection would brew like summer wine. Death would appear polite, delayed. No witness would recall a girl slipping through smoke. She returned to her garret and washed hands in a cracked basin, water pink with memory. When she looked up, Arya Stark's face stared back from the wavy tin mirror. Yet behind the eyes lay fathomless dark, a kind of lazy amusement. A raven perched on the sill, black against starlight. A message bound to its leg bore a sign she knew. The coin moon of Braavos. Instructions, she thought, and fed the bird crumbs of stale bread before untying the scroll. 2 words written in Braavosi glyphs. Lannister soon. The wind shifted, carrying the faint toll of bells from the harbor. She folded the scroll, lit it with taper flame, watched it curl to smoke. Below, a drunk whistled some bawdy tune Arya might once have sung. The copy listened, head tilted, then hummed the chorus in perfect tune, though its meaning meant nothing. Music was merely vibration in air. Weeks coiled tighter. Snow threatened but melted on filthy streets. The girl wandered markets, sampling street stew, practicing the clumsy gait of a country lass. The air of a lady's maid, the swagger of a sellsword. Faces within a face. She slept little. Dreams came crowded with wolves circling a grave she could not see. Jaws streaked red. Once she awoke with nails raking her own throat, heart pounding with grief so sharp she tasted copper. Old feelings echoing from dead flesh. She breathed deep, slow, reciting the Braavosi catechism until the tremor passed. The day arrived garlanded in false spring sunlight. A procession wound toward the great sept. Queen Margaery's name-day charity, doves released from gilded cages. The girl melted into the throng, wrapped in homespun, face smudged with ash. Sir Meryn Trant, newly risen to Red Keep command, led a column nearby. His piggish eyes scanned for threats, never seeing the slight girl at his elbow. She brushed against him, murmured, "Pardon, sir," and left a teardrop of clear oil on the leather of his glove. By nightfall he would rub his eye, irritated by unseen grit. His vision would blur, nerves aflame. Within an hour he'd claw the socket empty. The girl watched him ride away, then turned north along shadowed alleys, heart steady. Later, in candlelit quiet, she etched fresh lines upon the mental ledger. 2 names yet lived among the highest branches: Cersei Lannister and Walder Frey. She weighed iron coins in her palm. Braavosi fare homeward. But another calling rose, faint but insistent. A pull toward Winterfell, where snow fell thicker each day. The copy considered. The kindly man's orders concerned the Lioness Queen, yet sometimes the god accepted improvisation if the harvest proved rich. She slept, and the wolf dream came again, clearer. A Daira wolf, ghost pale save for dark tips of ears. stood before the crypts beneath Winterfell, sniffed the air as though sensing an intruder. At its paws lay a small sword broken in half. Needle, she realized. Grief thundered through borrowed veins, and the wolf howled, a sound of such raw yearning that she woke sobbing into sheets. For long minutes, she could not breathe. The feeling was alien, unwelcome. She slammed hand against the wall until knuckles bled, forcing calm. Morning light spilled gray into the garret. She stared at the smear of blood on plaster. Tears dried on her cheeks. Somewhere deep, a question stirred. If Arya Stark was dead, why did her memories still bleed? She rose and drew the dull knife. Its edge reflected amber dawn. Slowly she pressed the tip to her wrist until a red bead formed, bright as garnet. She watched it swell, then licked it away. The taste was metallic, alive. In the stillness she whispered a name. Not a kill, but a plea, Jon. The syllable shivered in air. The fanfare of trumpets drifted up from the Red Keep. Cersei was crowning Tommen with false smiles. The city braced for new festivities, new debts. The girl sheathed the knife and turned away from the window. 5 hours had slipped through her hands since she first set foot on land, yet her mission had only begun. Somewhere in the shadows, a lioness sharpened claws, unaware that death already wore a wolf's face. The girl gathered cloak and coin. She would need passage across the Trident, swift horses north, perhaps a change of face along the way. She thought of Winterfell's ancient stones, of the echoing steps that might greet her softly when she crossed those gates. Would the walls know the difference? Would Jon? These were questions for another dusk. For now, she descended the narrow stairs, her tread silent, and stepped into the din of King's Landing, where every crowd held 1,000 faces, and not one of them saw the death walking among them. Kya, Kai. A hush lay over King's Landing in the soft gray hour before sunrise, that brief breathing space when the city's stink cooled and the bells had not yet found their tongues. The girl who wore Arya Stark's skin drifted along the high ground above Flea Bottom, where the stones were slick with dew. Rats nuzzled overturned baskets, pups howled for milk, and a spice seller snored beside his cart. All of it folded into her awareness like motifs in a half-remembered song. A cobbler's wife shuffled past with a splintered lantern, muttering that every crack in the city led to hell. The girl marked the cadence of her steps, the slope of her shoulders, filed them away with a dozen other gates she might need to borrow. She had studied the capital for a fortnight now. Its pulse, its currents, the quiet crosswinds that carried gossip from the Blackwater quays up to the Red Keep's marble spines. Each morning she slipped a different guise over her borrowed face. Yesterday she had limped through the fish market, as a pox-scarred crone trading carved whistles for eelskins. The day before she had swaggered in sellsword leathers bright with rust, offering muscle to whoremongers on the street of silk. Tonight, she carried neither staff nor sword, only a wicker basket draped in linen, and the silence a shadow keeps. Her destination was a sagging townhouse wedged between a shuttered bookbinder's shop and a shrine to the mother that smelled of mild dewdrops. No lamp burned within, yet she rapped twice, sharp, paused, then thrice in quick succession. Locks clicked like teeth. A panel slid aside and a narrow eye peered out, pale, nervous, ringed by old bruises. "You late?" hissed a voice behind the slit. "Storm slowed me," she answered in a soft Riverlands burr. "Still want the tongue of the Queen's cupbearer?" The door unlatched. She slipped through into a corridor rank with boiled cabbage and wet wool. Faint candlelight revealed a hunched man wrapped in a moth-gnawed cloak. Cheeks eaten by pox. They called him Sparrow Jack, a broker of secrets for anyone able to pay in coin or living flesh. Jack offered a grin missing 2 teeth. Cupbearers moved to the Tower of the Hand. Harder to reach. "Nothing's hard," she said, "only costly." He ran thumb and forefinger along a ledger sewn from rag paper. "Coin's light of late. Might pay with knowledge instead. Knowledge spoils quick." "This won't," Jack wheezed. "Northmen claim a bastard son o' Ned Stark now rules Winterfell. Jon Snow, they call him." The name struck her chest like a thrown pebble, rippling along a frozen pond. She let the pond remain still. Old news. They also say he's made alliance with a red witch and a free folk army. Kings in the south grow worried. Southerners worry every time it snows, she replied. But the ripple would not settle. Her mouth had shaped that name only once since Braavos. A whisper scraped raw against her teeth. Now it perched in memory, bright as a fresh coin. Jack angled the ledger toward the lone candle. Bring me the cupbearer's tongue or finger if that's easier. And I'll have you inside the keep kitchens inside a week. Elsewise, find another rat hole to scurry through. She set her basket down. Beneath the linen lay a neatly coiled braid of golden hair bound with a tiny jade clasp. Jack stared. Red Wing girl, barely 15, she said. Went missing outside a sept last night. She sang in the Queen's septa choir. 7 save us, Jack breathed. But his fingers fluttered to snatch the braid all the same. Rare proof sold dear. This buys your passage. It buys more, she corrected. A name, papers for the castle, and a map of the postern gate. The cupbearer will keep his tongue for now. Jack's grin returned, sharper. I misjudged the quality of my client. Done. He pricked his thumb, pressed the blood onto wax, and sealed a grubby parchment slip. She tucked it behind her belt, dipped her head, and vanished back into pre-dawn silver. The red keep awoke like a sluggish leviathan as sunlight bled over the black water. Guards shuffled from barracks yawning, stable boys cursed at mules, and bakers lugged steaming loaves through the serpentine yard to the cavernous kitchens beneath Mager's holdfast. By mid-morning the girl stood in a queue of new scullions. Her brown hair was streaked with soot, freckles painted across a nose broken just so by a pinch of wax. She clutched forged papers naming her Tansa Rivers of Maidenpool. A fat undercook with rings of sweat beneath each armpit stamped her paper, commanded her to fetch tarragon, peel turnips, scrub the privy pots. She curtsied, murmured, "Aye, sir," and slipped into the heart of the keep. For 3 days she bent her back at menial tasks, scalding grease from copper cauldrons, sorting weevil-ridden sacks, hauling buckets of offal to pig pens. She studied the rhythms of the hive. The Queen broke her fast at the 3rd hour with small clothes-maid Brunella tasting each morsel first. Septa prayers filled the royal apartments at noon. Lord Keyburn padded corpse quiet through shadowed side corridors at dusk. Every watch change, every corridor pinch point, every servant's rumor she folded into memory. The kitchens proved an orchestra of knives and curses. Beside the ovens a deaf boy named Hob grinned at her with flower-white lashes and showed her where the mice nested. She set traps but never checked them, preferring to trail a wine steward named Derek who delivered flagons up twisting service stairs to the small council chamber above. Her chance came when a rat popped from a drain, sparking screams among washer-girls. Derek thrust his tray at her and ran to stamp the pest. She climbed, balancing silver ewers, heart steady as a pendulum. 2 gold cloaks loitered at the archway. Bored, sweaty men whose gaze slid off a plain scullion like water off stone. Within, the council quarreled in low, harsh voices. She knelt by the sideboard, pouring robust Dornish into heavy cups. Mace Tyrell's ringed fingers grabbing 2 at once. Grand Maester Pacell fumbling at a stopper. Lord Jaime tapping wood for silence, while his sister glared bright as wildfire. Cersei's eyes, green as frostbitten olives, raked the girl a beat too long. Instinct coiled. She bowed deeper, veiled by hair, retreated as any low servant should. Yet she savored a flicker of triumph. She had seen the Queen's face from 10 feet, studied its angles, the crow's feet cracking beneath rouge, the faint twitch when someone spoke of Tully rebels. Faces are keys. Keys open doors. That night, curled on a straw pallet in the scullion's loft, she dreamed of snowdrifts swallowing a courtyard of gray stone. Jon stood amid whirling flakes, cloak rippling black, eyes luminous with stubborn fire. He raised a torch that guttered in wind, searching shapes hidden beyond the storm. She tried to shout, but silence chained her throat. Then Jon turned, saw her, and smiled in wonder, before the torchlight blew out and darkness swallowed them both. She woke slick with sweat despite the chimney chill. Other scullions snored, oblivious. Moonlight spilled through a cracked shutter, It silvered her hands, their tiny nicks and welts, the half-faded scar where Nymeria once nipped playfully long ago. The memories seethed, living things. She pressed fingers to temples and murmured the prayer drilled into every acolyte of the House of Black and White. Valar Morghulis, Valar Doharis. All men must die. All men must serve. Yet whom did she serve here? The god or the ghost beneath her skin? At dawn she descended into the tunnels behind the armory, where cellars stored winter vegetables in damp gloom. No one expected a scullion to navigate that maze, which made it perfect. She kept count of paces, traced patterns in mildew on the walls, found an old sally port sealed by rusted chains. Beyond lay a sheer drop to the hillside, the postern route Sparrowjack's map promised. She would need rope, a tool to shear iron, and the quiet of a moonless night. 2, perhaps 3 days more. The next afternoon a hush spread through the keep. Queen Cersei held chapter with the High Septon, and every servant was ordered to scrub halls until the floor shone. The girls seized the distraction to drift into Maegor's old dungeons where wildfire jars once slept. They were gone, but cobwebbed racks of torture implements remained. Among them she pried loose a small, slender awl, thin enough to pick locks, strong enough to pierce soft flesh between ribs. She folded it into her bodice. Later she served roast quail at a banquet for Braavosi envoys, irony thick on her tongue like syrup. She caught lilting dialects, the clack of wooden dragons as the Sea Lord's men gambled, the flatteries welded beneath smiles. When she refilled goblets, an envoy's sleeve brushed hers and he flinched, murmured, cold as a corpse, little dove, before laughing too loudly. She smiled with Arya's crooked grin, the one Robb used to tease, and let the wine spill onto his lap. As guests roared, she vanished again. At midnight, she returned to the Sally Port, bearing rope. All, a cracked lantern, and a mummer's cloak dyed the gray-brown of hillside stone. She sawed rusted chain until links groaned apart, eased the door a finger's width, listened for alarms. None came. The air tasted of pine and damp earth, strangely clean after the keep's grease-laden tang. She tied rope to a pillar, scaled down to brush-covered slope, and melted into the trees. An hour's walk brought her to the river road where illicit markets thrived under star-glittered tents. Cut purses, hedge wizards, and half-starved poachers haggled by torchlight. She passed through like a phantom, searching for a singular tent marked by 3 brass bells and purple bunting. Lady Telluri's house of charms. Within, incense curled thick, sweet as death-shroud lilies. The proprietor, Lady Telluri, had once been Teliorgari of Lice, pupil of the face stealers before they cast her out for greed. She trafficked now in cheaper tricks, false mustaches, spirit gums, potions that paled skin. Telluri tilted a nautilus shell pipe from painted lips when the girl entered. "You bring coin this time, or only pretty threads?" "Need a tincture to blur the edges of a queen's mind," the girl said. "Slow, subtle. That pleasure costs gold." She opened her fist. 3 square ingots from the keep's scullion hoard, each stamped with a lion. Telluri's yellow eyes widened. She rummaged among blue glass vials and produced a wafer-thin ampoule of cloudy liquid. "Green fire," she whispered, distilled from shadowbinder dust and poppy tear. 1 drop in wine, and the drinker wanders waking dreams. A second drop. She'll half forget herself for days. Too much, and the heart forgets to beat. Nindros. Side effects. None evident for hours. Then pupils bloom wide, skin chills, voice slurs. The girl slid the ingots across velvet. Double the dose might kill. Might. She tucked the ampoule into a cloth pouch lashed at her thigh. "No names, Telluri. I never learned yours," Telluri crooned. But her gaze lingered, glassy. The girl noted the way her fingers trembled as if excitement warred with fear. Perhaps word of a missing Braavosi choirgirl's braid had reached her. Secrets fell like rain in this city. She retraced her path to the Sally Port, replaced severed chain with a length of stout cord stained rust brown, and climbed inside unseen. Dawn blurred gray in eastern windows by the time she collapsed on pallet straw, boots still laced, heart thundering with possibility. Tonight, the lioness would sip dreamfire. But the many-faced god weaves webs no mortal sees entire. By noon, bells clanged across the keep. "The king is dead," voices cried. Tommen Baratheon leapt from the tower. Shock rippled through corridors like heat over coals. The kitchens erupted in chaos. Trays dropped. Cooks wept. Scullions prayed. The girl watched it all with outward dismay and inward calculation. Tommen's death changed everything. Cersei would double her guard, sip only wine poured by sworn tasters, banish unfamiliar servants. Dreamfire could still work, but approach would demand new invention. Meanwhile, grief gnawed at her stomach for reasons she could not name. Perhaps Arya Stark had pitied the gentle cub king once. Perhaps it was merely the echo of a child unloved and bled of choice. She pushed the feeling aside, yet it trailed her like a scent. 2 days later, Cersei commandeered the great septee for a private vigil. All candles must stay lit till sunrise. All Lannister colors draped the nave. No tongue but a Lannister tongue to speak prayer. The girl found herself assigned to lug wax crates from storage to sept doors under watchful twin Lannister guards. Opportunity appeared within the very jaws of watchfulness. She bribed a dim-witted lamplighter with sweet biscuits to spill a cask of olive oil across the nave's back aisle. "Clumsy as me, lady?" he moaned as tiles glistened. Amid the uproar, she slipped the ample's measure into the queen's mulled hippocras, swirled it once, and withdrew unseen. Night deepened. The girl climbed the sept's western belfry, hidden between gargoyles, gaze fixed on stained glass flare below. She watched Cersei kneel before Tommen's shrouded figure, hands shaking though her voice remained stone. Septons intoned. Courtiers sniffled. No one noticed how, as hours crawled, the queen's lids drooped, her shoulders sagged. Her mouth curled not in grief but confused wonder, as though she peered into a room she scarcely recognized. A second drop would have quickened the heart's forgetting, yet only one had dissolved in wine. The queen lived, but perceptions warped. Cersei stumbled, rising. Jaime darted forward. Maester Qyburn's cold eyes missed nothing. The girl saw his thin lips tense. Rats multiplied in the walls of her plan. She retreated before daybreak, leaving vigil uproar behind. Back in the scullion's loft, she counted pulse beats, considered next steps. Qyburn would chase whispers, sniff for alchemy. Any scullion who had approached the queen's cup would stand at the edge of interrogation blades. She had already stayed too long. Time to fly north and let the lioness mind unravel on its own. That afternoon she stole stable garb, a piebald palfrey, and 3 days' provisions. At dusk, she rode through the gate of the gods with merchants fleeing plague rumors. King's Landing shrank in the dust behind her, great walls hazed orange by sunset. Above the bay's dark curve, the red comet of memory still trailed the queen's face in her mind, but another beacon burned brighter now. Winterfell's roofed walkways, Joan's torch flickering in endless snow. She took the rose-red north, avoiding inns thick with lion banners. The palfrey's hooves 8 leagues by moonlight. She passed fields where reapers sang dour songs, hamlets scorched by marauders, ghastly totems strung with broken helmets. War never slept. Yet along the verge primroses dared to bloom. Their scent wove with night air, faint reminder that beauty persists like moss in cracks of stone. On the 5th evening, she reached Bitterbridge. The town common swarmed with refugees. Tyrell peasants driven east by ironborn raids, Selsale widows tugging children, hedge knights crippled and drunk. She bartered half her rations for a patched cloak, the color of wet bark, then lingered by fire to hear fresh tidings. A graybeard boasted that the bastard of Bolton was flayed and hung from his own walls by the king in the north. Another claimed ghosts walked Barrowton marshes. A woman crooned of dragons torching the Hightower's docks. Each rumor glimmered like a shard of glass, uncertain where it cut truth. She stored them all. Bolton dead would mean Winterfell freer ground, but danger seldom vanished. It only shifted shape. Still, her pace quickened when dawn cracked. Past the Mander her palfrey foundered crossing a rocky ford, ankle twisting. She slit its throat at dusk to end pain. Crows gathered before blood cooled. She trudged north on foot, sharing roads with traders hauling flax to Stony Sept. One trader, a plump Dornish woman named Miriel, offered her perch beside crates in exchange for arrow-fletching work. Miriel jabbered of lost loves and spice tariffs while the wagon rumbled. The girl answered in easy monosyllables, weaving yet another persona. Arya, orphan daughter of a tanner killed at Storm's End. They camped near a ruined sept overgrown with ivy. Miriel roasted carrots in bacon fat, humming bawdy tunes. The girl chewed quietly, then felt eyes upon her. A lean man with ragged blonde beard crouched across the fire, gambler's hands restless. "Pretty tongue-tied, this one," he drawled to Miriel. "Bet she sings sweeter than you." "Shove your bets," Miriel scoffed. "She's worth more sober than you drunk." The gambler's gaze lingered. He wore no house badge, but the glint in his stare told of cruelties practiced and enjoyed. When Miriel slept, the girl rose to piss. The gambler followed, quiet, but not quiet enough. She heard dry twigs snap, melted into shadows, let him stumble past, then looped behind. Her awl slid beneath his ear, quick, precise. No scream, only a gurgled sigh. She dragged him to a ditch, covered body with bracken. Returning to camp, she scrubbed blade in dirt, wiped hands on dew-wet grass, lay beside dying embers until sleep nipped. She dreamt of a direwolf again. Only this time, the beast stood not over a grave, but at a crossroads in falling snow. Two paths stretched, one south toward the blazing wreck of a lion's den, one north toward a keep with open gates. The wolf turned its head as though asking which road she would choose. She woke heartsick, the question unanswered. The riverlands opened into wilder country where frost sheened reeds at dawn. Days passed. She parted from Miriel near Maidenpool and struck solo across the plains. Sentries in fray colors manned a toll bridge over the Trident. She watched from brush as they extorted travelers, drowning those too poor. An urge hot as magma welled. Walder Frey's brood in reach. But names must wait. Winterfell pulled stronger. She circled upriver and swam across at dusk, muscles blue with cold. On the far bank, she built a tiny fire inside a ring of stones, wrapping herself in the bark cloak. Flames cracked. Steam rose from her clothes. She rubbed hands together, and for the first time in weeks she whispered aloud into the void. "Why do you linger?" The voice surprised her. Hoarse, almost pleading. She imagined answering herself. Because pieces of Arya Stark still cling like frost on iron. Because the wolf's howl will not let go. Wind moaned through willows. She dozed lightly, and dreamed of the house of black and white. The kindly man strode among pillars, staff tapping. "Ace is a promise," he told her. "Break the promise, and the face breaks you." She looked down. Fissures spider-webbed across her borrowed skin, eyes oozing black ichor. She woke gasping, hand at throat. The fire was ash, dawn-grayed river mist. The promise had not broken yet, but cracks were forming. She pressed on. Autumn dried to brittle cold, puddles iced before noon. Northmen columns passed bearing stark direwolf banners, veterans of Bolton's fall marching home. She kept hood low. Mitts, earth-dusted. Once she brushed shoulders with a tall ranger whose laugh reminded her of Benjen Stark, and grief stabbed so fierce she near staggered. Yet he never glanced her way. Near Acorn Water the road forked. West to Barrowton, east to White Harbor. She chose east, less patrolled, though longer. Their signposts leaned broken, but she hunted Sun's Arc Ori. The White Knife Valley carried scent of pine and distant snow. Memories quickened. Hot bread in Winterfell kitchens, Maester Luwin's bells, Hodor's booming chuckle. They poured through her like thaw water, unstoppable. She muttered the Braavosi catechism, yet it faltered. Outside White Harbor's walls, refugee camps sprawled. Wool tents braced against sea wind. She bartered a day's labor-gutting cod for passage on a flat-bottomed skiff headed upriver. The Manderley's granaries loomed white and round as castle towers. Harbor guards wore stark gray now, a sight both strange and right. She sailed past, heart thrumming. 3 days upriver, the captain put her ashore where the King's Road re-emerged. Snow fell in lazy spirals. Skeletal forests whispered overhead. She felt eyes again. Real ones this time. Shadows moved between birches. Shaggy silhouettes pacing her silently. Wolves. Twilight's blue grew bruised. A solitary howl lifted, joined by 3 more. She remembered old Nan's tales. Wolves sense those who steal wolf blood. She knelt, sat down pack, met the darkness with steady breath. The pack halted 20 paces away. Leader a huge silver white with scarred muzzle. Yellow eyes shone like coins in moonlight. For a heartbeat she thought of Ghost. Joan's silent guardian. The wolf sniffed, ears flicking. She dared not blink. Long moments stretched. Finally the beast huffed, turned, padded back into snow-laced undergrowth. The others followed. She exhaled, pulse ringing. Perhaps the pack smelled the dead god riding her flesh, or perhaps they recognized a far-carried echo of the girl Arya once was. The snows deepened enough that every step became a wade. She stole a half-lame Garen from a Karstark encampment, leaving 3 coins in its empty feed bag, a courtesy Arya's father might have approved. The Garen's breath plumed like kettle steam as they climbed the last ridge before the King's Road dipped toward Winterfell. And there it was, fortress of gray granite, banners whipping, torches dotting battlements like fireflies. Smoke curled from chimneys. The Godswood's ancient heart tree rose stark crimson against ice. She reined in, staring. A tremor swept her limbs, not from cold. Home, yet not. She dismounted beyond arrow range, hid the horse in a snowy thicket, and drew hood low. Gate guards wore shaggy bearskin cloaks over mail. Their spears carried fresh ribbons of white linen for mourning the fallen. She joined a trickle of small folk granted refuge from wildling raids. Wax seal papers long forged named her Nira Rivers, cook's helper. The guard squinted, but hunger lines on her cheeks spoke plain truth. He waved her through. Inside, the courtyard thrummed with smiths hammering new horseshoes, stable boys brushing ice from manes, spearwives sharpening pikes. She drifted near the kennel, heart veering to burst. Every stone, every window shuddered memory. She smelled baked onions and pepper, the same stew she once despised as a girl running laps round Maester Luwin. She nearly laughed aloud. From the keep's main door emerged a tall youth in black-cloaked finery, John Dodd. He spoke with 2 officers, pointing at maps. His hair was longer, streaked with gray ash near the temples. His posture more rigid, but his eyes, dark pools of winter twilight, were the same ones that had once pleaded with her to practice needlework and to forgive Sansa. Emotion slammed her so hard she had to grip a post. She could not face him. Not yet. She sought shadows, weaving through cellars until she found the corridor to the old crypts. Torchless, empty. She descended, boots scuffing dust. Stone kings watched in silence. At the far end rested new sculpted effigies. Robb Stark, carved with his direwolf gray wind, curled loyal at stone feet. Rickon's small likeness, Bran's tangled roots yet to be cut by death. Candles flickered where someone came to pray. Cold seeped into bone. She knelt before Ned Stark's grim visage. 1,000 thoughts wrestled inside. I am sorry I avenged you, I lost myself. Yet no words left her throat. She felt hands trembling. In that quivering she sensed the fissures widen. The face might break, the promise unravel. Tears came, thick, hot, unstoppable. She bit her lip, but they fell anyway, splashing marble. A voice echoed down the crypt. Who's there? Soft, wary, carrying the creak of an old soul in a young shell. She turned. Bran, no longer a crippled boy, but a lean young man with carved wood calm, leaned on an ash staff. His nightwolf eyes fixed on her with unsettling depth. Of all Starks, he would see truths others missed. Forgive, she whispered, throat raw. I lost my way. He stepped closer, unfazed by gloom. You wear my sister's face, he said. Not a question. Wind seemed to still inside the crypt. She swallowed. Denial would crack useless. Instead, she unhooked her cloak, let it fall, and in a voice edged with steel answered, I serve death and the living alike. I carry her memories. Yet you are not Arya. No. No. The word echoed like Nell. Bran's brows knitted, but not in fear. Pity? Curiosity? When the weirwoods whisper, they speak of a shadow in her shape. They tell me she died far across the sea. Tears blurred his outline. She did, the girl whispered. And still, she walks. I walk, she corrected. For how long? I don't know. I have names yet. Digben Saber. He studied her, gaze dipping to all at belt. You came to kill. I came because the wolf dreams would not cease. Bran's breath fogged in chill. Ghost howls each night outside my window. He howls for Arya. John thinks the wolf mourns in dreams. She closed her eyes. Maybe he calls me home. Maybe. Bran's voice softened further, older than stone. Come. You must speak to John. Fear, pure and sudden, lanced her. To meet John's gaze would be to face the promise's full breaking. Yet hiding would break it just the same. She followed Bran upward, through spiral stair, into the courtyard, where blue twilight collected under rampart shadows. John stood by the archery butts instructing a ringmail squire. When Bran murmured to him, John turned, and froze. The wind stopped. She felt every heartbeat in her body. John's eyes widened, mouth parting as if to shape her name. Then uncertainty flickered. She braced for outcry. But John crossed the yard slowly, each step deliberate. Snowflakes feathered his hair. He stopped an arm's length away, wore a look fitted from equal parts hope and dread. Arya? He breathed. The girl inhaled, the chill slicing lungs. Not Arya, she whispered. She passed beyond. Pain carved his features, but he asked nothing, perhaps could conjure no words. Bran's calm voice intervened. She carries our sister's face, her memories. Yet her path is knotted with darker threads. John's gaze held her, searching, perhaps begging for lie undone. She forced herself to speak past the quaver. I was sent to deliver death to lions, yet ghosts dragged me north. I needed to see. Her breath hitched. Needed to see you stand alive. John's throat worked. I stand. For now. Snow drifted between them like dandelion seeds. Around, soldiers trained, unaware that the dead converse with living. She felt the moment spin fragile as blown glass. If she remained, the kindly man would send hunters. If she fled, a wolf dream would brand her a coward. Your war's not done, she managed. Ice comes from beyond the wall. You'll need every blade, living or dead. John's eyes glinted. If you fight for us, I care little what name you bear. Names matter. Maybe, to the south. A corner of his mouth twitched. The ghost of a boyhood grin. Here I know faces better than names. Her breath fogged, mingling with his. She considered placing her fate in his hands. A fate she herself barely grasped. Then hoofbeats clattered. A scout galloped through the gate, shouting that a Lannister vanguard flew toward the neck, thousands strong, lion banners aflame and winter wind. War marched too close. John pivoted, barking orders. Bran's eyes glazed white, skin paling as he sought raven vision. The girl stepped back, unnoticed now, folding into courtyard bustle. She realized choice had already woven itself. She would stay. To fight. To let Arya's vengeance bleed into a broader war, where death's ledger demanded heavier coin. Lion or dead man or shadow. She would carve the names written by both Wolfheart and Faceless God. And perhaps, in that carving, discover whether a promise could mend instead of break. That night she knelt once more beneath Winterfell sky. The aurora shimmered green above, like veils of the many-faced god swirling through cloud. She whispered to the cold voice steady, Arya Stark, if any thread of you remains, guide my hand true. John, Bran, the North. Let them know mercy where I may give it, terror where I must. Let the crack in this face not unmake the woman wearing it, but forge her anew. Nemetor soy. A lone howl answered from the godswood. Not ghost's mournful call this time, but a clear, sharp note that cut glass. Welcome. She rose, strapped all alongside a stolen northern dirk, and strode toward the armory where the Night's Watch smith worked sleepless to fit iron into purpose. Snowflakes hissed on forged coals. She reached for a practice blade. Its hilt settled into palm as though it had waited years. She took position, feet planting in the packed earth, exactly where Sir Roderick once coached her footwork. And she began again. Steel blurred beneath silent stars, carving arcs that stitched memory to present, living to dead, promise to potential. Each swing whispered a name, not of prey, but of belonging. Winterfell, Wolf, North. Above, the aurora flickered brighter, as if some distant god observed, and, impossible though it seemed, approved the fracture and its forging. Somewhere far south, in chambers perfumed with cedar and rot, Queen Cersei Lannister woke screaming, her dreams rife with doorways that opened into endless snow, a faceless wolf prowling the edges. Qyburn measured her pulse with cool fingers and penned a raven to Braavos. The shadow you loosed has fled north. Send your price. The House of Black and White received the message days later. The kindly man read, set quill aside, and smiled beneath the mask of an old stranger. All men must serve, he murmured. And the waif, face stripped pale core, stepped forward eager as frost. Thus 2 hunters now paced distant roads, one forged of wolf memories seeking truth in belonging, the other forged of discipline seeking debt unpaid. Their courses curved toward Winterfell like comets yearning collision, and between them lay wars both of steel and of identity, waiting to be written in the white pages of snow. The girl, no longer certain if she were shadow or spark, choked her blade with leather, exhaled into the sting of night air, and behind the rhythm of practiced footfalls she heard, faint yet rising, a heartbeat that might belong to Arya Stark after all. K. A sleet-coated dawn bled pale light across Winterfell's ramparts, turning every patch of fresh fallen snow to crushed pearl. The girl who had once been Arya Stark finished her 4th hour of drills in the muddy yard, breath fogging in ragged plumes. Around her, the fortress stirred to life. Smiths beat iron in a thunderous cadence. Ravens flapped from high windows, and a chorus of stable grooms cursed the weather as though it were a Lannister banner itself. She paused only when the clang of the bell tower boomed 7 times. Her shoulders burned. The thin cotton of her practice shirt clung damp to skin. She wiped her brow with the back of a wrist and canted an ear to the keep. Jon had summoned his war council before first light, and the murmured talk among sentries said raven messengers had arrived from the Eyrie and from Deepwood Moat. Whatever lay primed beyond the neck grew teeth overnight. She bound her dirk in a leather wrap, slipped the awl into a boot, and started toward the great hall. A hoarse shout stopped her. Sir Davos Seaworth hailed from beneath a torched archway, cloak slapped by wind. Halya? Naira? 7. Save me. I forget what name you gave the quartermaster. His smile was wry. Whichever you remember, smuggler. He lifted a brow. Jon wants you inside. Says you've a tricksy mind for shadow work. And Bran says... Well, Bran says you ought to listen. The word sat uneasily. Proof she'd been discussed by men who wielded armies, not merely rumor. She followed Davos along a covered walkway dusted with fresh powder, the air alive with tang of pine and horse dung. Inside the hall, banks of braziers spat sparks into cedar-heavy haze. Jon stood at the long table, hands braced on weathered oak. Beside him loomed Tormund Giantsbane, eyes like chips of frozen sky. Opposite, Lady Meg Mormont's brow, shadowed by worry. Bran sat in a high-backed seat near the hearth, still as carved bone but eyes bright with greenish luminescence. When Jon saw her enter, he inclined his head, equal measure greeting, and fragile trust. He gestured to a chalk map pinned with iron nails. Rumors become more than rumor. His voice carried gravel and exhaustion. A lion host left Harrenhal a week past, 15,000 foot, and near 4,000 horse. Add crossbowmen, 10 pieces of field siege, commanded by Saradam Marbrand, sworn true to the queen. Tormund spat in the rushes. Let them come. We'll feed their pretty red cloaks to the snow. They push with the ground still soft, Davos said. By the time they reach the neck, mud will snare their wagons, but if they draw out the crossing, they'll have time to build timber roads. A disciplined host can force Moat Cailin if it lays platforms and marches night and day. And Lady Mormont jabbed at the chalk line. And who keeps them honest while they build? The Karstarks still lick their Bolton wounds, the Umbers bleed men from the Midgewater sickness, and Deepwood can spare few. Jon's gaze drifted to the girl. Bran says a smaller knife may serve better than a bigger shield. A night raid, quick as thought. Strike Marbrand's command tent before they reach the causeway. Cut off the head. Watch the tail flounder. I need someone who moves like smoke. Ishi. Across the table, Bran's stare found hers. Steady, measuring, sorrowful and curious, all at once. She felt as though the weirwoods themselves leaned closer through him. Command tents grow eyes, she said. Better to kill the quartermasters who keep food lines breathing. Soldiers unfamiliar with marsh winters starve faster than they grieve a commander. Jon's lips tightened in thought. Supplies move by river skiffs on the Green Fork. Davos agreed. Sink 3 barges and their bread molders in muddy water. But bread doesn't walk, Tormund interjected. For fear you need heads rolling in the slush. Fear feeds faster than empty bellies. She weighed both truths. Do both, she said. Poison the flour sacks, then slit the captain's throat while his men shit themselves. A dying army doubts every crumb. A hush lingered. Jon's black-browed stare cut through flickering brazier light. Can you do it? I can try, she answered. Her pulse quickened, but not from fear. The thought of carving a path through lion ranks filled her with something perilously close to savage joy. A thrill the many-faced god might call dispassionate purpose. Yet she knew its truth. The wolf in her blood hungered. Jon dismissed the council at last, but halted her when she turned. He pulled her aside to a curtained alcove behind the hearth. The stones warm enough to melt frost in her hair. You risk everything sailing into their camp, he said. I should send a squad, not... His voice faltered. Not someone alone. Shadows walk quieter than squads, she replied. Anxiety flitted across his features. These last nights ghost has prowled under your window. Bran says the direwolf keenly knows you. Tell me true, what are you? It might have been anger or grief that pinched her throat. She could not name it. I don't know, she breathed. I carried your sister's face so long I lost the shape beneath. But each hour here the cracks widen. I fear what pours out. Jon's gloved hand hovered near her shoulder, but did not touch. Sometimes cracks let light through. She almost laughed. Instead, she nodded, turned, and left him staring into embers that hissed like distant surf. Preparations unfurled swift as a drawn arrow. Davos procured a sleek, pine-hulled skiff from White Harbor smugglers. Maester Wolkan brewed henbane tincture to corrupt flour. Lady Mormont summoned 2 scouts from Bear Island, wiry women who spoke in grunts and rode like seals. None questioned her command, though curiosity burned in every sideways glance. 2 nights later, sleet drummed the shivering sea when the skiff glided away from Wintertown's pier. Icicles hung from rigging lines, snapping under the sway. She wore boiled leather armor dark as tarnished silver, her real blades strapped in linen greaves, and a ball of wax sealed around the henbane vials. As oars dipped, she felt the castle recede, its torches a lantern winking farewell. Snow blurred world and sky into one seamless shroud. The Bear Island women rode silent, teeth bared against cold. By daybreak they reached the rolling marshlands where the King's Road diverged into plank causeways. Black water hummed between pale sedge. Fat crows dotted rotting logs. No Lannister outriders yet, but horseprints scored the mud, fresh deep. She guided the skiff up a narrow tributary cloaked by willow curtains, and waited. Shouts carried noonward. The first supply flotilla, 6 broad-keel riverboats, red banners snapping above stacked crates. The current forced them single file. She watched from reeds, feeling time slow. The Bear Island scouts notched bows. At her motion they loosed shafts, thudding into the necks of bowmen stationed amidships. Chaos flowered. She leapt from the skiff like a cat, landing on the lee barge. Boots skidded across icy planks. A crossbow quarrel hissed past her ear. She ducked beneath a sailboom and drove her dirk up through a sergeant's jaw. Then came the hush between heartbeats, when all movement narrows to a corridor. She sprinted to the rear hatch, splashed henbane dust across burlap flour stacks, slit the water casks with her awl. Grain soaked, curdled. Men shouted, blades rang, arrows hissed. But the bare island archers answered each cry with red feather shafts. She kicked free the steering oar pin. The vessel yawed toward a half-sunken snag. The barge behind crashed broadside, crates tumbled. Hull timbers groaned as river water swallowed them. Within minutes, 3 supply boats drifted crippled. Others pinwheeled away frantic. She plunged into the frigid current, let it swallow her gasp, and surfaced among reeds 100 yards downstream, skin ablaze with cold. The scouts pulled her aboard the skiff, faces stone. 2 hours later they hid beneath a peat overhang, shivering, while Lannister couriers galloped upriver to report disaster. Night blanketed the marsh. Time for the head, she thought. They abandoned the skiff and crept, half crawling, through muck that smelled of rotten iron. Torches glimmered ahead. Marbrand's vanguard encamped on a rare hillock of firm ground, palisade half-built, tents pitched in ordered rows. Trumpets brayed. The command pavilion rose at center, a crimson-striped canopy snugged with guy lines. Beyond, wagon fires flickered around open cookpits. She tasted wind, onion, ale, sweat, wet wool, also juniper, some lord's cologne. Marbrand dot. She signaled the scouts to circle left, start a distraction. They vanished soundless. Moments later, shrill shrieks cut the night. A lantern smashed, horses whinnied frantic. Camp rang with confusion. She slipped through a gap where 2 watchfires lay unlit, keeping low, using tents as cover. Inside the command canopy, 4 officers argued around a wine-stained map. Marbrand, square-jawed, tired, armor unbuckled at the throat, glared over goblet rim. She ghosted behind stacked grain sacks, dipped a rag into last vial of henbane, wound it tight round her awl. One step, another. She was 5 feet away when a lieutenant turned suddenly, eyes widening as torchlight brushed her face. He opened his mouth, the awl buried in his eye before sound escaped, henbane seeping. Marbrand spun, hand seeking sword. She ripped the dagger across tendon inside his elbow, then under ribs. He staggered, gurgling. 2 other officers lunged. One brandished a maul. She ducked left, seized the wine jug, flung it into the brazier. Flames whooshed skyward, clinging to tent cloth. An officer shrieked as coal spilled onto oil-soaked rugs. Chaos again. She darted across the pavilion, cut a slit in the back wall, and slipped into night while the canopy blossomed fire-orange against sleet. By dawn, she and the scouts crouched beneath pine limbs 2 miles north, drenched, mouths rimed with hoarfrost, yet alive. Behind them, plumes of smoke curled from the hillock camp. Supply barges sank belly up on the river bend. The lion's tail had been singed. They began the trek home across open flats now sealing into ice. But the many-faced god's ledger never balanced so easily. 3 days out, a blizzard swallowed the marsh tracks. White-sheeted earth and sky alike. The lead scout, Hild, broke through river ice and vanished under before they could haul rope. Silence swallowed her final gasp. They marched on with grief hidden behind clenched teeth. On the 5th dawn, shapes appeared through snowfall. Riders. At first, she braced for Lannister outriders, but no bright cloaks fluttered. These men wore mottled gray leathers, faces hidden beneath wooden half-masks carved like owl and hawk and cat. Shadow Tower Rangers. No, die. She knew those masked forms. The kindly man's disciples. The faceless men had come. She urged the remaining scout, Brynja, to flee toward Winterfell, but the woman gripped her spear. They hunt you, not me. They hunt anything in their path. A whistle pierced the wind, inhuman in its pitch. The riders gained pace. She saw one among them, saddle hood thrown back, pale cheeks, eyes black as basalt. The waif. Her presence quickened a pulse of molten fear and brittle anger. No time for thought. She pushed Brynja into a drift, whispered, "Stay still. Show nothing." Then she sprinted toward a stand of ice-rimmed birch. Wax-soft snow muffled her boots. She leapt a fallen log, ducked beneath sagging limbs, breath ragged. Behind, hoofbeats muted by snow but relentless. The forest opened to a shallow frozen pond hemmed by stone outcrops. She slid to a halt. The ice creaked underfoot. Ahead the far shore lay 10 yards. She risked it, praying to old gods she scarcely knew. Each step sent spider cracks radiating. Halfway across, the waif reined up on the bank, dismounted in one fluid motion, bareheaded despite flurries, her blade a sliver of shadow. "Wolf girl," the waif called, voice gentle as lullaby. "Drop the face. Come home. I have no home in Braavos. You have no home anywhere." Ice thundered beneath them. The waif advanced across the glassy sheet. She moved weight evenly, dancer-light. They closed the gap. 8 paces, 5, 3. "When you drank the gift, you promised," the waif said. "Your debt is unpaid. I paid with my life. And yet you breathe." The waif lunged, blade flicking. She parried with the northern dirk, sparks skittering. Steel rang again and again. The ice fissured louder. She gave ground, calculating weight, breath, distance to shore. The waif struck low. She leapt back, foot landing on a patch too thin. Crack. Water roared up and swallowed her leg to the knee. Cold like knives. The waif smiled, stepping closer. Another thrust. A faint high, then slash mid-torso. She twisted, felt fabric tear and stinging warmth. Blood beaded red on snow-crusted leather. She breathed slow, memories pulsing. Joan's torch direwolf howl. Ned's stone face. Cracks. They let light through. Maybe they let blades through too. She pivoted hard, stamping boot heel on an old fracture line she'd noted seconds before. The pain shattered beneath the waif's forward foot. Icy water yawned. Momentum dragged her sideways. She shrieked, arms pinwheeling. For an instant her eyes, once Arya's own, flashed panic. The girl plunged her dirk into a different fracture at her own feet, anchoring as the sheet collapsed outward, taking the waif with it. A splash. A gasp. Frigid water closed over that pale skull. The waif resurfaced, spitting curses in Lacine. She clawed for ice edge, but the slush churned to slurry. The girl crawled backward on belly, weight distributed, until she reached thicker ice, then the shore. She rose shakily, shivering, and watched as the waif's thrashing slowed, voice turning to strangled gurgles. Eyes wide, mouth seeking air that would not come. She sank. A stunned quiet settled. Falling snow erased boot prints, tears, and the faint scream the waif carried into the depths. She stood trembling, wounds weeping warmth that steamed in winter breath. The waif's horse, spooked, had bolted. The riderless companions wheeled, uncertain. She took one step toward the pond, then another, staring at the inky hole the waif left behind. A flash of memory. Candlelit vaults, faces hung like macabre fruit. She almost whispered a prayer, but the words died. The debt, perhaps, was paid. She staggered to Brynja's hiding place. The scout emerged with spear leveled until she recognized victory. They bound wounds, stole the wife's mount once caught, and rode. No faceless pursuit followed. The others had vanished, maybe unwilling to test a wolf-haunted forest, now that their leader drowned. By the time Winterfell's walls rose from blowing flurries, her fever burned. She swayed in the saddle. Guards rushed. Bran's ravens shrieked overhead. Maester Walken unpacked leech kits, tinctures of willow bark. Jon paced edges of the wooden tub where they cleaned her cuts, face taut. When night fell, she drifted in and out of sleep, half-dreaming wolves circling a white tree under dancing green lights. 3 days later she woke clear-eyed in a solar overlooking courtyards buried under another foot of snow. Her wounds scabbed, fever broke. Ghost lay curled at her bedside, tail thumping slow when she stirred. She scratched his ear. He whuffed, content. Jon entered, clad in black fur mantle. Relief softened his features. "You live," he said simply. Barely. You broke their army. Ravens say half what remains turned back to Harrenhal. The rest mired in bogs, too soupy to move. Negative Porsas. She nodded, but victory tasted thin. Another will come. Cersei won't relent. I know. But you bought the North a winter's breath. He hesitated. The scouts found a corpse frozen beneath cracked ice. Face washed away, eyes pecked. She met his stare. The dead followed me. He considered that, then only said, the dead should stay dead. He laid a small bundle on the blanket. Needle. Cleaned, oiled, wrapped in blue wool. The crypt guardians found it hidden behind a fallen beam. I thought you'd want it. Wow. Her breath hitched. She unwrapped the blade. Its slender length shimmered dully in firelight. Wolf's sigil still etched, though faded. Memories flooded. The first prayer to the many-faced god. The choice to hide the sword instead of discarding it. She closed fingers around the leather grip. The tactile memory fit her hand, like destiny soothed. I am no one, she whispered. But maybe I am also Arya. Jon's eyes glimmered. Why not both? Outside, horns blew a warning. Jon strode to the arrow slit. A dust cloud rose on the southern horizon, but not lion red. Silver and black banners ripple-whipped by cutting wind. Dothraki outriders and unsullied phalanx. Advance elements of Daenerys Targaryen's host. Jon turned. Brush of a smile on weary lips. We may have allies. She stood, muscles raw yet alive, and buckled needle at hip opposite the northern dirk. Two halves of a life stitched by pain. Together they descended into the bailey. Ghost pacing at her heel. Snow whirled thicker, conjuring white walls taller than Winterfell's ramparts. A storm approached from beyond the wall too. Ravens brought whispers of blue-eyed whites surging south behind a Night King reborn in corpse steel. Two wars would converge upon this keep. As drums of dragon queens rumbled beyond the gate, she lifted her gaze to swirling flakes. In each snow crystal she saw a face. Father, mother, brothers, the waif, the kindly man. All men must die. But not today, her pulse answered, echoing through scars and new skin alike. Today, she would stand beside those she loved, and those she had yet to understand. Cracks and all. She drew needle, tested its balance. Light sliced around her like dawn. When she sheathed it, the faintest smile curved her mouth. Wolfish. Fragile. Irrevocably human. The road ahead would run crimson with dragonfire, lion schemes and ice streams. Yet for the first time since Braavos, she felt whole enough to walk it. In the yard Jon's voice boomed commands. Unsullied ranks clicked shields. Tormund cursed cheerfully about black-blooded, buggering icemen. She strode to join them, head high. And if the many-faced god watched from shadows, perhaps even he paused a moment. Curious how a single stolen face could remake destiny not through surrender, but through the refusal to forget the living heart that once beat beneath it. Snowflakes kept falling. Soft, relentless, indifferent, and she breathed their chill like promise, stepping forward as Winterfell's gates yawned wide to greet dragons and death alike. Wet snow hissed on the braziers lining Winterfell's outer court, releasing sullen tendrils of steam that wrapped the mustering ground in shifting veils. Through those veils came the sound of an army arriving, not as thunderous charge, but as an endless exhalation of boots, hooves, and creaking leather. Spears tapped cobbles like metronomes. Foreign syllables drifted, sharp as flint and smooth as river-worn jade. Dothraki curses, the curt Valyrian drill calls of unsullied officers, the deep-voiced commands of Northmen struggling already to weave strangers into their defenses. Atop the battlement the girl watched a procession unlike any the castle had borne since Aegon's fires faded to folktales. First rode a wedge of screamers, harebells chiming beneath crusts of ice, curved arcs glittering in wan sunlight. Behind them marched shield-locked phalanxes, spears angled inward like teeth of a steel wolf threatening to bite the world. Elephantine supply wagons followed, their wheels wrapped with rawhide to grip sleet. And at the column's heart, pacing with lithe grace beside a standard of 3P-headed black, strode the Dragon Queen herself. Daenerys Targaryen wore a mantle the color of storm clouds with silver embroidery suggesting unfurled wings. Snow caught in the pale braids crowning her head and melted on the warm ivory of her cheeks. She carried no weapon save the invisible one, the knowledge that two full-grown dragons wheeled above Winterfell, shrieking greetings that rattled window shutters and sent stable horses rearing. Jon met her at the gate, black cloak snapping in a gust. Their brief embrace showed nothing of lovers' heat, only battlefield urgency, as though they had practiced setting aside tenderness before dawn. The girl descended the stair in time to see Davos kneel with hand pressed to heart. The courtiers followed, bent spines forming ripples through the slush. She knelt with them, half-hearted, eyes fixed not on the Dragon Queen but on the dragons themselves. Shadows coiling into snow clouds, scales flashing green, copper, and night black as they banked above the broken tower, where Bran often perched. One beast bawled, belly glowing faintly like banked embers. When the show of fealty ended, the gates rumbled shut. Snow resumed falling, thick now, each flake the size of a thumbnail, as though the sky itself tested how much weight the world could carry before cracking. The chill reached deeper than before. Somewhere on the periphery of thought she sensed an answering cold far north. Ice giants trudging, silent legions forging their frostbitten way southward. The time between signals grew shorter. The realm breathed in. Soon it would exhale winter's final breath. Where once she might have slipped away unheard, she found herself jostled by proceedings. Her presence suddenly not an intrusion but an expected piece in the machinery of war. Davos beckoned. Tormund gripped her forearm with a grin that displayed teeth chipped from frozen mammoth bone. Then she stood before the Dragon Queen herself, under a timber gallery strung with grimacing gargoyles of First Men tradition. Daenerys studied her through lashes silvered with melting snow. "Jon calls you Arya," she said, voice low and musical. "But his letters mention ghosts around you. Should I seek another name?" The question came sharp as a needle's prick. The girl bowed slightly. "Names are weather," I answered to the storm at hand. A twinkle of wry amusement crossed Daenerys' face. "A useful habit in these latitudes. Very well." The storm at hand secured our rear by cutting the lion's supply line. For that, she has my thanks. She glanced at her knights. "Reward her. Full rations from my stores, whatever horse she chooses, and a place at the tactical table." The unsullied captain beside her thumped a fist to chestplate. Jon's smile flashed, pride tinged by something quieter. The girl felt it like a coal pressed to skin. Pride could melt the discipline of no one. She banked that ember, careful not to breathe too deeply. Hours later, the great hall roared with a meeting of commanders that seemed half feast, half funeral. Maps weighted by daggers sprawled beneath dripping tapers. On a dais, Gendry Baratheon hammered new dragonglass spearheads for show, sparks raining toward a floor already etched by decades of boots. Lord Glover argued the thickness of palisades. Grey Worm spoke of interlocking shield walls. Davos reminded all that the enemy would not sleep, would not break ranks, would not feel fear. Bran, pale as snowlight, sat near the hearth, closed eyes fluttering now and then, as if ravens whispered behind his lids. The girl watched him most of all. When he twitched, she saw reflections of leaf-veined weirwoods and nights without moons. At length Bran opened his eyes, and said that the Night King marched along the King's Road, not the abandoned gift as some had thought. His route skirted the garrisoned moat posts of the Rangers, ignoring easier passes. Because he hunted something. Eyes slid to Jon, to Daenerys, then to Bran himself. Bran merely added, "He hunts memory. He hunts me." Silence fell so heavy the tapers seemed to sag. Afterward, Jon pulled her aside into Maester Luwin's old turret, repurposed now as planning annex. He unrolled a smaller map, dotted with black stones shaped like ravens. "Bran believes the Night King will strike for the Godswood first. If the heart tree falls, the spiral magic that binds the wall's last charms will unravel. I need a guard inside that grove who understands shadows." His gaze held the weight of a promise, or plea. She felt tugged between burn and frost. The Godswood's heart tree was where a younger Arya once knelt, wishing to be a knight, not a lady. And it was there perhaps that she now would face the oldest, coldest memory, death walking in flesh. "I'll watch the roots," she said. From that day the castle became a hive of anticipation. Foreign smiths coated dragonglass arrowheads with resin to prevent shatter. Dothraki groomed their mounts' manes with ribbons of flaming cloth to spook the dead horses that would surely thunder down. The northern women practiced short-blade grips beside unsullied pikemen. Tormund drilled shield-breaker wedges, roaring body encouragements that set younger squires blushing scarlet. Tightly hoarded rumors fed long nights. That Melisandre the Red Woman rode northward on a pale mare. That Qyburne's maesters had forged scorpion bolts, tipped with wildfire to hurl at Daenerys dragons. That the Ares falcon banners might still arrive though snow choked every sky pass. The girl slept, seldom. When she did, ghosts prowled her slumber. Ned turning to smile sadly before a weirwood. Sansa singing of lemon cakes while ash drifted. The waif pounding on ice from beneath, mouth full of riverweed. She woke each time with hand on needle's worn grip. One dusk, patrolling ramparts, she found herself shoulder to scale with the dragon. Drogon perched on the broken tower where Bran once fell, wings folded like black leather sails. His eye, molten gold flecked with ember red, tracked her. A heartbeat later, Daenerys emerged onto the parapet. She laid gloved fingers on Drogon's shoulder ridges and murmured in Valyrian, stilling an edgy ruffle of wings, then turned. "Do you fear him?" she asked. "Only fools fear fire," the girl said. "And only fools forget to fear it." Daenerys' laugh held no mockery, only exhaustion. "I rode him first believing he would burn my fear away. Instead he taught me fear's true shape. Every time we climb the sky, I remember how small I am in his shadow." She paused, searching the girl's eyes. "What shadow teaches you?" She considered before answering. "That the face we wear is never as heavy as the lies we carry beneath it. A useful truth for a queen." Daenerys replaced a loose scale fragment on Drogon's forearm, as though fitting a puzzle piece. "If we survive the night soon to come, I will need those truths. Westeros is a tapestry frayed by lies." They stood together watching twilight bleed purple above the snows until a horn blast summoned both away. On the eve of battle, the wind changed. It came from the north, dry and brittle, carrying a faint scent reminiscent of deep caverns where torch flame cannot live. Scouts returned breathless. The dead marched 5 leagues distant, silent tide, across ice-hardened fields. Their vanguard a line of pale giants hauling tree trunks for siege. A hush rolled through Winterfell as if the entire keep inhaled and could not decide to breathe again. Jon issued final orders. At Bran's urging 2 concentric rings of dragonglass stakes were sunk around the godswood. The outer for whites, the inner held by 10 shield-bearers of the free folk, their shields rimmed with black ice, axes laced with obsidian. The girl took position within the lowest branches of the heart tree, high enough to see across the courtyard wall, but near enough to Bran, who sat beneath the carved face, spine pressed to white bark, his cloak pooled like melted snow. The girl felt uneasy seeing him so still. He was keystone to every memory Winterfell held, an anchor that might be ripped out. Tormund stalked by once to clap her shoulder. "If the little crow falls, bite his killer's ears for me." He lumbered away chuckling. Levity tasted thin. Night pooled, starless. Fires were banked to slitted barrels to preserve vision. The watch bell tolled thrice, then was muffled to silence. Only the slight patter of snow off cloaks betrayed living souls in the lines. She tightened fingerless gloves, flexed. Needle felt light as breath, but the dragonglass dagger at her belt weighed cooler. She would need both edges tonight. Then, the hope-breaking quiet collapsed beneath distant cracking thunder that was not thunder at all. Thousands of dead feet striking frozen ground, each step in perfect unison. A low groan trembled through the rampart stones. Every living throat in Winterfell tightened. The dead had come. Moonlight pierced clouds, pale as the unblinking eyes advancing across treeless plain. Shields lifted, arrows knocked, unsullied ranks dropped to kneel, spears angled. Dothraki screamers nudged horses to prance restlessly. flaming arak tips wavering lines of orange. Jon, sword bare, stalked the front like a grim sentinel. Daenerys stood on Drogon's bowed neck, silhouetted against the wooden stockade behind. Ghost slunk forward until his flank brushed Jon's knee. The wolf's low growl trembled through dark. The front files of whites halted beyond arrow reach, as if pulled taut on an invisible leash. In the hush that followed, frost crystals drifted sideways along the ground, driving before some unseen pressure. Then they came into view, white walkers astride undead elk, tall, lamp-eyed, armored in plates of rime. Between them glided a dead man wearing black armor traced with delicate spirals of icy blue. The Night King. He dismounted before the stakes, head tilting in a gesture mocking gallantry. Behind him, whites parted to clear a corridor of packed snow, leading straight to the gate. Jon raised Longclaw in both hands, voice steady though barely above a whisper. "Hold." The girl shifted on her branch, eyes pinned. Bran's breathing deepened, but he did not waken. The Night King stepped forward, perhaps 20 paces from the first unsullied shield. He surveyed the ramparts like a lord assessing property newly inherited. Lore claimed his eyes burned azure. In truth, they seemed to swallow color completely, leaving only mirrored void. He lifted one clawed gauntlet and pointed not toward Jon or Daenerys, but directly toward the Godswood's heart tree, directly at Bran. Dragonglass stakes rattled as if freezing liquids cracked them from within. Some split, shedding splinters. A shudder passed through the white ranks, and then they surged as one. They did not scream. They made no war cry. They simply ran, arms wide, mouths agape, like a tide that forgot to be water. Flaming arrows streaked downward. Obsidian shards punctured skulls, dropping bodies into twitching heaps. Dothraki screamers flanked with howling fury, fire axe carving arcs of light through black mass. But the dead swallowed flame and steel alike, piling over barricades. The first giant, half-skinned and horned by ragged bone, lifted a log in both hands and smashed down upon the outer wall. Timber exploded, sending Northmen tumbling. The girl braced as Bran's eyes snapped open, pupilless white lakes. He exhaled a word she did not know, ancient and shaped like wind over old stone. Ravens burst from the high branches overhead, a flurry of black wings storming upward to meet the bigger storm. But the Night King had already begun his advance toward the inner ward, unhurried, certain. Drogon shrieked, fury and rose, wings beating thunder. Fire roared incandescent, bathing the white tide. For an instant, they melted like wax figures. Yet flame faltered along some unseen barrier near the Night King himself, curling away in a confusion of orange and greenish sparks. The dead lord walked untouched through corridors of charred ruin. Grey Worm led unsullied phalanx into the breach, shields locked. He met the walker's vanguard where frost blades clanged on dragonglass tips. One walker shattered under 3 spear jabs, its body fractured into shards with a sound like a forest of icicles falling. Yet more stepped in. Grey Worm's line bent. Within the Godswood, the air turned brittle enough to crackle with each breath. Bran's mouth moved, chanting in a language she knew only by ear, the old tongue of children of the forest. His fingers gripped the roots of the heart tree like claws. Sap ran crimson down bark as though the face itself wept blood. The girl darted to outer ringed stakes, slashing through 2 whites who toppled over, frozen fingers still grasping at her boots. One free folk shield-bearer took a lance of ice through throat, and fell twitching. She dragged his shield up, planted it to close gap. All around, whirls of snow and ash blurred the line between living and dead. Jon attempted to flank the Night King with a small knot of wildlings, but a white walker intercepted, blade shimmering. Longclaw met its chill edge. Obsidian, meteoric steel groaning under the shock. The girl glimpsed Jon's posture slip. Exhaustion from weeks of sleepless nights and too many burdens. She started toward him, but Bran gasped behind. An ice lance sprouted from the trunk beside his ear, thrown from beyond the ring. She whirled to see the Night King inside the perimeter now, raising another. The battle surged in pockets, but here, inside the Godswood, world shrank to 2 hearts. One beating in her chest, ragged and hot. The other so still inside the Night King's ribcage it seemed absence instead of organ. He hefted the second lance, crystalline, barbed, aimed not at Bran this time, but at her. She saw the gesture through falling snow, and felt time stretch like taffy. She calculated distance, weight, angle, remembered the waif's face disappearing under ice. She stepped forward, raising nothing but her dragonglass dagger, not to parry, impossible, but to bait. He flung, and she twisted aside, letting the shaft whistle past her cheek, to thud into earth behind. Before he could draw a third, she flung her own weapon, an impulse born in the marrow of instinct. The dagger spun, a shard of frozen night. It struck his wrist. The obsidian cracked on the gauntlet and disintegrated into black flakes. But something else happened. The Night King staggered half a step, as if the impact jarred not flesh but deeper magic. Blue eyes flicked toward her. Irritation? Surprise? Hard to tell. He advanced another pace, frost forming clawing tendrils across the grass with each step. From above descended sound like entire glaciers calving, Drogon diving, wings searing air. The dragon vomited white-hot fire laced with roiling green. Corthian wildfire casks ignited in his maw. An alchemist's gamble denaries had accepted in the last council after hearing of Scorpion Bolt. Flames engulfed Night King and girl alike. She felt heat hammer her spine, smelled hair singe. Yet the inferno parted around the Night King again, swirling off his figure in spirals of emerald orange. The ground under him glowed red. Her boots smoked but did not ignite. The snow evaporated underfoot, leaving a circle of steaming mud. Bran's voice cried sharp behind her. "Dragon glass in the roots!" The girl understood. She pivoted, snatched a spear from a fallen spearwife, dragon glass blade still intact, and rammed it down through exposed root mass where blood sap oozed. A pulse shivered up wood and into air, a vibration that rattled teeth. The Night King halted. For the first time she saw the void in his eyes flicker. Hairline fractures appeared across the lance he held. They traveled up his arm where her earlier throw had impacted. Spider-webbing icy armor. Bran's chanting rose, guttural, unstoppable. The ravens overhead dived in mad circles, swirling faster, until they became a whirlpool of black motion above the clearing. Wind screamed through the sacred grove. Roots bucked underfoot like snakes. Facing the Night King, she pulled needle free. Its Valyrian steel edge gleamed, tiny ripples catching stray firelight. She stepped between Bran and death. The Night King let his broken lance fall, and drew a sword resembling frozen smoke. They circled on mud ringed by vapor. Needle's reach was pitiful next to that ice blade. Her only advantage lay in speed. She shifted to water dance stance, hips low, feet skating swift. His first slash chimed sparks from her parry, sending numbness up her wrist. Second swing carved a curl from her braid. She retreated half a step, pivoted, lunged at his left knee. Metal rang, no purchase. He reversed stroke, but she slipped under. Memory flooded her. Sirio Forel shouting, "Left, left, always left." She feinted right, dropped to knee, thrust forward. Needle bit beneath a plate seam at his groin. She felt it slide into something that gave like brittle porcelain, then stuck. Blue fire flared along the wound. He made no sound, but his blade faltered. Bran's voice crescendoed into a single note that resembled both Weirwood Creek and Child's lullaby. Sap welled from the heart tree, bright as fresh blood. The Night King froze. Cracks radiated from the puncture, racing up chest and neck, splitting helm, vein-like fissures glowing blue-white. He pivoted toward Bran in final, deliberate motion, a predator still believing in prey. The girl interposed, pushing her shoulder against his arm. No strength could match his, but in that moment, the fissures reached his eyes. The void filled with starlight, then shattered. The Night King exploded into a cyclone of glittering shards. They dissolved before hitting ground. His sword clanged to earth, evaporating to vapor. Across the battlefield, wights juddered, collapsed like marionettes whose strings were cut. White walkers screamed, their voices swallowed as their bodies fractured. The roar of combat subsided to the soft hiss of settling crystal dust. For several heartbeats, the world held a surreal quiet. broken only by distant crackle of dying wildfire and the soft moan of cold wind. Then cheers erupted, ragged, disbelieving, raw.wall. Northmen, Dothraki, unsullied cried in a babble of tongues. Jon bent double, hands on knees, breath pluming. Daenerys slid from Drogon's ridge, legs trembling, and ran toward the godswood. The girl, still kneeling, fingers locked around Needle's grip, realized her hand bled where frostbite crept into flesh. She released the sword, flexed stiff joints. Bran lifted fingers from the earth, sap retreated, sealing wounds and bark. His eyes returned to Hazel. Tears rimmed them but did not fall. "It is done," he whispered. She turned to look at him fully. Those eyes, though mortal again, held endless corridors. Somewhere beyond, she felt the many-faced god regard this moment. A debt paid, a face fulfilled. Yet her heart surged, not with debt but with warmth, painful and wild. She had protected the memory, and in doing so perhaps earned her own. Daenerys entered the circle, cloak torn, cheeks streaked with soot and melt. She knelt beside Bran, laid a hand on the white trunk in wonder. Jon followed, Longclaw's edge blackened. The three leaders exchanged a glance heavy with relief, and with a dawning awareness of the next storms already brewing. She stepped back, leaving them. Ghost trotted beside her until she paused under the largest of the godswood's boughs. Snow kept falling, though gentler now, flakes dissolving against her heated skin. She lifted face to the sky, letting cold water trace tracks along soot-smudged cheeks. Above, ravens circled once more, settling on branches. One gave a curious croak and cocked its head at her. She nodded back. In the distance, the dawn gray was brightening. On ramparts soldiers wept, embraced, or knelt shivering with shock. Fires hissed beneath sheets of sleet. Yet here in the grove there was peaceful silence, broken only by Jon's quiet thanks, Daenerys' promise of funeral rites for the fallen, Bran's slow sigh. She sheathed Needle and approached the crumbling ice lance still lodged in earth. It had not melted entirely, rather, it had taken on a clarity like flawless crystal. She touched it and felt nothing but chill, a reminder of death's impermanence once the wielder is gone. She snapped the tip free, pocketed it as memory. As castle bells tolled victory, men already spoke of feasts, of queen's claims, of southern wars resumed now that northern doom was banished. She felt the tide of politics creeping back like seawater reclaiming sand from retreating storm surge. Nothing ended. Shapes merely changed. Toward midday she found Jon in the ruined training yard, where smoke curled from braziers used to burn white bodies. He stood alone, watching black snowflake ash swirl. He turned as she approached, offered burnt leather gloves for her battered hands. No words. A quiet understanding passed. Debt, grief, pride, and the fragile gleam of future. Later, while healers stitched horse bites and frost-cracked skin, she overheard sailors arguing in the great hall about new storms moving west from the Twins, lion hosts regrouping, perhaps emboldened by news that the North must surely be broken and exhausted. She smiled at the irony. Broken? Maybe. Exhausted? Certainly. But there were cracks to let light through. That night, Daenerys declared a day of remembrance for fallen of every banner. Then 2 days of rest before marches south. Jon assented, though his eyes lingered on ghost-pale pyres, still smoldering. At toast's end, wine spilled. Dancers attempted steps, though legs quivered. The girl slipped out, trading feast heat for crystalline quiet under winter's high stars. She walked the outer wall, boots crunching new snow, and considered the next face she might need to wear. Maybe she would ride south, as a nameless outrider, or as cat-eyed assassin in the silked pavilions of the Reach. Maybe she would sit by Sansa's hearth one day, confess truths in flickering firelight. Wind tugged cloak edges. She breathed crisp night and realized the scent of pine and cold iron no longer stabbed with loss. It lived alongside something like belonging. At patchwork, cracked but bright. Below, a stable boy practiced sword swings with a stick, pretending to be Arya Stark dancing circles around Lannister guards. He stumbled, laughed at himself. She smiled, unheard. Beyond ramparts, wolves howled. In that chorus she heard one note unlike the rest. Familiar, rough-edged, full of old roads yet walked. She closed her eyes and answered with a whistle she had learned years ago crossing a holdfast's roof beams. The howl quieted, then rose closer as a white shape bounded near the wall's base before melting back into timber shadows. Ghost, or some other, carried the reply. She exhaled fog into starshine and set a silent vow upon it. Cracks and faces and debts behind. Roads and storms ahead. The cracks might never seal, but she no longer feared the spaces between. Through them she saw constellations glittering, new stories waiting to be named. Dangsha. 3 days of pale winter sun slipped by in a shimmer of slush and remembrance as Winterfell licked its wounds and fitted itself for war again. Snowmelt drummed off slate roofs, carving rivulets that revealed patches of the old stone beneath white drifts. Everywhere the mingled banners of wolf and dragon fluttered, gray dire wolf rampant beside black three-headed beast, as if history itself tried new patterns on the loom. The morning after the funeral pyres collapsed into quiet mounds of ash and char, Jon called a gathering of every sworn lord, every cal, every captain. He did not sit the dais, but stood amid them at ground level, refusing distance. Ghost paced behind, nose lifting at the tang of smoke that still clung to the hall timbers. Daenerys loomed slightly apart, flanked by Grey Worm and Missandei, her expression schooled, but her eyes raw with sleepless determination. Jon spoke first, rough and plain. He named the dead, thanked the living, and ended with a promise. The winter darkness had broken, but a shadow no less dangerous crept up from the south, wrapped in gold and wildfire. The realm must heal, he said, yet Woundmakers still rule in King's Landing. If we leave that lion's den to fester, everything we saved here will rot by summer. Then he turned to Sadr. He turned to Daenerys. She stepped forward, voice clear as frost water. I came to save the living from the dead. We have done it together. Now I will free the living from tyranny, and I ask you to stand at my side. No one cheered. They did not need to. Resolve weighed heavier than noise. In the hush, Arya, she had stopped wrestling the name, felt the tremor of destiny quiver through the hall like a bowstring. The North had broken the oldest nightmare. Now the living nightmare awaited. Plans blossomed, each petal darker than the last. The dragons must fly south once fires rekindled. Unsullied would march down the King's Road's charred ruins, securing outposts. The Dothraki would flank through riverlands to harry supply lanes. The northern foot would follow, anchoring every retake and holding in a chain of forts. Tormund volunteered the free folk to scout ahead, ghosting through hills too rugged for armored columns. Sansa, who had sat silent beneath the direwolf banners, asked pointedly who would remain to hold the north should the lions lunge in their absence. In reply, Jon placed Lady Mormont in charge of garrisoning both White Harbor and Deepwood Motte, while Lord Royce of the Vale promised Eyrie troops to patrol the Neck. Amid these logistics, Arya listened for the undertones. Distrust curling behind courteous nods, the friction of iron wills. Many Northmen already muttered that a Targaryen queen owed her victory to northern sacrifice. Tyrell men whispered that wolves might turn on dragons once the lions were dead. The air between Jon and Daenerys crackled with tension unspoken. He had not publicly accepted or rejected her claim, and she had not pressed. Yet every eye watched for a fault line. That fault line found its first fracture when Gendry Baratheon, fresh from nights at the forge and new to the high tables, received legitimization from Daenerys, at her own prompting. She raised him Lord of Storm's End, a gesture of mercy peppered with strategy. The hall was politely glad. Arya alone saw Jon's lips tighten for a breath, worried perhaps how many new kings it would take before the realm choked on crowns. Later, while smiths reshod winter-blistered horses and scribes penned ravens of alliance, Arya slipped through Winterfell's eastern sallyport into crisp pre-dawn. She followed the sound of clashing sticks until she found Gendry drilling in the yard, shirtless despite frost, muscles ridged beneath rows of half-healed bruises. Dawn pinked the sky behind him. He turned at her footfall, grin already forming. She tossed him a spare leather jerkin. "Wear it before you freeze into a shirt of ice. Northerners grow spines thicker than oak. And I'm lord now. Lords run hot." But he tugged the jerkin on, leather creaking. "You off to dance with shadows again?" "Soon." She watched his practice blade dart, parry, thrust. "First I'm learning how to protect kin without losing myself." He planted the stick and leaned. "Sounds more dangerous than assassinating queens. If I do it right, maybe it's the same thing." She smiled without mirth. They sparred until sunrise bled gold over ramparts. When he ducked a swipe and tapped her shoulder, she froze. Vast twitch of anger, fear, memory of the wife's staff slamming bone. But Gendry's eyes held only concern. She forced a laugh, sheathed needle, and walked away before he could apologize. The march south began a week later, under skies bruised purple. Dragons wheeled overhead, a living roof of scaled thunder. Their shadows passed across the frozen fields, where lines of men tramped ankle-deep in churned slush. Banners fluttered. The direwolf, the kraken of a handful of ironborn loyal to Yara, the black stag now sown beside a crowned sunburst to mark Storm's End's new lord. And at the vanguard rode Jon and Daenerys, separate yet bound by unseen threads. Arya traveled not with them. She rode ahead in a tiny troop of 6. Herself, the 2 remaining Bear Island scouts, a young maester from Old Town named Veleron, who spoke 7 dialects of Valyrian, and 2 silent Dothraki she chose for their uncanny ability to vanish. Their mission bore no banner. They were to slip past the Riverland holds, through the charred husk of Harrenhal, onto King's Landing, weeks in advance of the army, to fracture Cersei's eyes and ears, sabotage granaries, bribe harbor masters, spread rumor of wildfire caches beneath orphanages. Fear would carve out the queen's footing before the first spear met her walls. They left before dawn. Jon walked Arya to the secret door in Winterfell's crypt wall, far from watchful send-offs. They spoke little, his goodbye a rough hand squeeze, hers a nod. Only Bran, who seldom ventured outside since the battle, met them at the gate. He sat in a wicker litter borne by 2 free folk women. His eyes, as ever, looked at what was and what may be. "Beware the hands that offer golden chains," he told her. "And the stone that weeps green." She wanted to ask what stone, but some instinct forestalled it. She bowed once and slipped into the shadow-draped tunnel. They traveled light, never lighting fires, sleeping in abandoned crofts or under root hollows. Veleron's breath whistled in the cold. He confessed he had never strayed beyond Maester's path, until summoned by Dragon Queen. The Dothraki, whom Arya named Wind and Sand since they gave no Westerosi translations, scouted in widening circles. The Bear Islanders kept to themselves, sharpening fishbone hooks onto their axes. 2 nights before they reached the ruins of Harrenhal, ravens passed overhead in unusual numbers, blacking out a sliver of moon. Arya watched them swirl, felt that old internal tug, like a fishhook snagging her gut. Somewhere Bran moved a piece on the board she could not see. They slipped through Harrenhal's corpse at dawn, through courtyards littered with wind-blown bone fragments. Veleron shuddered at the melted towers. Arya led them along the God's Eye Road, hugging marshes to avoid Frey patrols. Once, skulking by a willow grove, they spotted a frail wagon train crawling north. Lannister prisoners, dragged by Sellswords wearing half-sun, half-lion sigils of the Golden Company. The Sellswords looked hungry, their discipline frayed. The prisoners worse. Starved Tyrell smallfolk bound for Harrenhal's dungeons. Sand whispered. Slaves in golden collars. They followed at a distance, and after sunset, ambushed. Arya slipped beneath wagon tarps, slicing ropes and throats with equal quiet. The scouts picked off stragglers. Wind set fire to the straw-packed weapon crates. Prisoners stumbled free, sobbing thanks. Veleron helped bandage a woman's frost-bitten feet, while whispering Old Town prayers. Arya gave each freed captive a choice. Flee west to Tully lands, or follow the North Host, and take refuge behind Honest Wall. Most chose the latter. They would spread word that wolves freed them while lions starved them. Seeds of rumor planted. The next fortnight blurred in pulses of sabotage. Tunnels collapsed along the Roserud to delay grain convoys. Hidden springs of a hillside fortress salted. An alehouse in Hayford bribed to serve rotten cask to Lannister outriders. Small cruelties, each thread in a tapestry of disquiet. Yet every league south tightened a new tension. Cersei's claws drew blood from distance. The first glimpse of King's Landing's blackened ramparts at dawn shocked their hearts mute. Smoke curled from chimneys like scorched hair from a corpse. On the horizon, the Red Keep crouched, swollen by half-finished scorpion nests along every parapet, resembling a giant wounded porcupine. Flea-bottom's shanties sprawled double their old reach, swollen by refugees. They hid their northern gear, donned rough-spun rags, and joined a line of beggars at the Iron Gate. Gold cloaks hustled them past braziers, where barrels of pitch burned day and night, filling air with oily soot to hide the stench of typhus. Inside, plague rumors slithered like eels, sewers overflowed, water barrels brimmed with bodies too poor for pyres. Fear, Arya thought, already eats this city from within. She need only feed it the right spice. Their safe house was an attic above a candle shop, run by a bent-back Lysani widow, Kasari, who owed a blood favor to the unsullied quartermaster. Kasari offered straw and onion broth, no questions. From there, Arya sketched a map of the Queen's Net, scorpions along Blackwater Bay walls, trebuchets stationed on Visinia's Hill, loaded with casks banded in bronze, wildfire barrels, if Bran's vision had spoken true. She prowled taverns, disguised as a mute washergirl, gleaned talk from garrisons. Qyburn tested new plague bombs. Euron Greyjoy's fleet lingered at Dragonstone's lee shore, pinning allied ships north of Crackclaw Point. Cersei kept the Red Keep half empty, having relocated her personal guard to the Great Sept ruins where wildfire tunnels remained. Most chilling, whispers of faceless men in the capital, robed in alchemist green, rumored to have stolen a dragonbinder horn from old Volantis. Arya's blood cooled. Shadows of Braavos still chased her. She resolved to confirm or kill the rumor quickly. During these days, wind and sand smuggled arms to dissident blacksmiths. The bears organized bread lines that collapsed after one stone thrown like gold cloaks turned riot into slaughter. 300 small folk died in mud Daitoi. Worse, Valeron was beheaded at dusk near the Street of Sisters, caught carrying scrolls stolen from Qyburn's rookery. Arya found his head on a spike, scrolls stuffed in mouth. She burned both that night, whispering a name under breath. Grief sharpened her focus. She hunted a wine cellar rumored to house Qyburn's faceless alchemists. Disguised as a one-eyed boy, she snuck through catacombs reeking of brimstone. There she glimpsed emerald vials stacked in pyramid towers. She marked their positions. Another night, she trailed a hooded figure in green up to the citadel of the Guildhall of Alchemists. The figure's gait, graceful, measured, burdened by no fear, sent ice along her spine. The waif? No, drowned. Yet the kindly man had many pupils. She followed through smoke-shrouded alleys until the figure vanished amid spice crates. Moments later, Arya felt a blade edge tickle her throat. A voice behind, soft as moth wings. The debt unseals new ledgers. She spun, elbow knocking steel aside, to see a woman in novice alchemist robes, with hair shaved on temples, eyes like chips of bleached glass. The woman smiled faintly. Our temple grieves for 2 deaths unpaid. The drowned and the demon king you stole from us. Bevenin? You should have walked quicker, Arya answered, drawing a dagger of cheap steel disguised in cloth. They fought in silence, each movement choked by stacked crates. At last Arya feigned a stumble. The woman lunged. Arya looped a burlap cord around her wrist, yanked, forced the dagger into belly. Blood-darkened green silk. The woman sagged, whispering, Valro, Mogulus, in final acceptance, touching Arya's cheek as if giving blessing. Arya shut her lids and whispered back, Valar Doharis. She hid the corpse in salt barrels and stole the robes. Inside the pockets she found a copper token embossed with the sigil of the Alchemists' Guild and a black iron coin with the Braavosi lightning bolt. She pocketed both, and felt a shiver. The many-faced god still counting. Using the robe, she entered the guild hall next dusk. No guard questioned her as she descended spiral steps into vaults, where wildfire slumbered in vaulted rooms. It glowed sickly under torchlight. She marked runes etched on vault doors, protections from heat, keyed to complicated copper gears. Too complex for quick sabotage. She needed a simpler spark. That chance came sooner. She overheard two guildmen planning to load casks onto wagons bound for the Sept's ruin, where Circe would host a demonstration before Uran's captains. Arya followed, counting crates, 6 barrels lots, each yawning with fissile emerald devils. If one cask ruptured inside scorpion nest crates, the chain flame would engulf half the hill of Belor. She tailed the procession to a courtyard under starlight. Gold cloaks ringed high walls. Scorpions pointed skyward, ready to bait dragons into range. Working by lamplight, apprentices used pulley cranes to lower casks into reinforced pits. Arya crept among scaffolds, scattering rat poison near horse feed. She whispered to wind and sand waiting outside. At dawn, cause a stampede. As hourglass sands trickled away, she returned to safe house to find Kasari trembling. A proclamation nailed to doors across the city named her and her companions traitors of the throne, offering a wagon of gold for their heads. Worse, Uran's fleet had seized 2 ravens meant for Winterfell. Learning of the army's southern progress, King's Landing now braced for siege. Arya saw one path. Circe must die before armies clashed. Without her iron spine, Qyburn's cruel sciences and Uran's arrogance might fracture. But killing the queen inside the Red Keep meant penetrating Qyburn's labyrinth and the mountain's monstrous watch. So she turned to Kasari and asked for a dress. Next day dawned gray gold. Market throngs thickened near the great Sept ruins where a scaffold dais had been raised. Circe would speak of divine right and show wildfire to cow dissent. Arya wove through crowds disguised as a Tyrell lady's maid. Dress of faded rose silk, hair dyed chestnut with walnut oil. Robe from alchemist still hidden beneath. A silver pin, shaped like a wilting rose, marked her as petitioner for Stormland restitution. A garb no one would suspect. Above, banners draped the collapsed Sept archways. The queen appeared in cloth of gold gown, her belly swollen near month term. Yet she projected imperial poise, one hand upon gleaming steel belly guard. Beside her loomed the mountain, blank visor reflecting green vats below. Qyburn stepped forth, his smile thin. Arya melded into a line of widowed ladies waiting to kneel. She was 20 paces from the first guardsman when commotion erupted behind. Horse screams, crashing wood, a stink of pitch, wind and sand unleashing stampede. Startled horses smashed wagons. One toppled a cask. Green fire belched skyward, sucking air with monstrous roar. Panic tore crowd. Gold cloaks rushed. The mountain moved to shield the queen. Amid chaos, Arya slid behind a column. She pulled free a small glass vial from Belleron's past stores, crude naphtha mixture he'd brewed, and hurled it under a second wagon. Flames erupted. Smoke billowed, choking sour. She dashed through confusion toward the dais. She met Qyburn first. He fumbled wilted scrolls, gasping at destruction. She slashed his throat with a hidden stiletto, letting scrolls spool into blood. His eyes widened, words dying on tongue. She stole his face in motion. Swift enough only the many-faced god saw. Then, wearing Qyburn's visage, hair and all, she ascended dais steps. The mountain saw, but did not strike. The dead man's friendship overrode suspicion. Circe turned, coughing. "Maester," she barked, voice frayed. "Control your children of fire." Arya Qyburn bowed. "Your grace. Safer inside the keep." Circe nodded, grasping for guard's arm. They moved down back stairs into passageways choking with dust. Flames licked archways behind, backlighting them in eerie green. Arya guided queen and mountain deeper, mind a blade of calm. They reached a vaulted corridor sealed for repairs. Rubble blocked exit, but a door into black cells stood ajar from quake damage. Arya paused, voice graveled. "Down here, your grace." A secret path to Maegor's holdfast still open. Cersei hesitated, woman's instinct pricked by memory of betrayal. Yet flames crackled behind. She pushed forth. The mountain ducked head to follow. They descended damp stairs flanked by weeping stone faces. The stench of rot and mildew rose. Arya counted steps. Halfway she spoke soft Valyrian. Torches lining wall flared suddenly. Not with flame but with choking smoke of herb bundle she'd wedged earlier. The mountain's helm visor clouded. He halted. Cersei hacked, one hand on swollen belly. Arya slipped behind, dagger poised. But the mountain's gauntlet shot back, seizing her wrist. His strength crushed bone. He turned. The red eyes within visor burned hatred beyond death. A hiss escaped broken lips behind mask. He smelt the lie. He hurled her against wall. Stone cracked, breath ripped from lungs. Dagger clattered. Cersei reeled away, shrieking for guards. None would hear through rumble overhead. The mountain advanced, unsheathing greatsword. Arya rolled beneath first swing. Steel shrieked off stone, showering sparks. Pain lanced her ribs. She grabbed a broken torch, flung embers at his visor slit. He flinched not. She darted behind column. Hands empty, save small clay flask of wildfire acid, plucked earlier. She smashed it on his breastplate. Green ooze hissed, seeping into joints. Mountain roared, blade whirling blindly. Pungent smoke filled stairwell. Cersei staggered up steps. Arya cut her off, ripping Qyburn's face away mid-stride. The sudden reveal froze the queen. Recognition, terror. I. Little wolf, she breathed. Then cunning flashed. Kill me and the babe dies, the realm curses you. Arya advanced, but in that instant, the mountain crashed into her from behind, wild with pain. They tumbled into a pile of rubble, grappling. Her mortal muscles could never match him. He found her throat. Vision darkened. She reached, fumbling, for broken wall stone. Fingers touched something cold. Veleron's salvaged lance tip. Forgotten until now, black crystal of the Night King's weapon. She plunged it under the mountain's armpit seam. The shard screeched through necrotic flesh and burst from collar. Blue sparks spat. The mountain jerked, releasing throat. Eyes blazing white for a heartbeat, then extinguishing. He collapsed backward, pinning her legs. She gasped ragged air. Cersei fled higher. Arya wriggled free, coughing blood. She climbed after. Above, the corridor glowed furnace orange. Wildfire chain reaction licking lower rooms now. Screams echoed distant. She found Cersei at a fork. One passage led to courtyard exit, the other deeper under holdfast. The queen slumped against column, blood running down in her thigh, labor triggered by terror. Arya approached, blade ready. Cersei raised shaking hand. If you are still half the Stark, spare an unborn child. She wept, shoulders racked. But eyes still glittered with ruthless plea. Memories shot through Arya. Sansa's laugh before war, Rick Khan's innocent chase, Gendry's grin, Joan's stern kindness. The faces of dead youths at Winterfell's yard. She hesitated. Mercy or justice? The many-faced god demanded debt, yet his ledger used no ink for innocence. But before choice carved itself, the ceiling groaned. A burning timber plummeted, smashing between them. Stone rained. Dust blinded. When it cleared, Cersei and rubble were gone. A gaping hole opened to dark cavern below. Arya peered over edge. Below loomed vault tunnels half flooded, flames gnawing support beams. No sign of queen. The rumble overhead warned of imminent collapse. She sheathed dagger, turned back toward city. She fled along guardways, as explosions thudded behind. One after another, concussive pulses of wildfire ripping scorpion nests, sending green fire geysers skyward. Half the hill of Baelor folded upon itself. From distant harbor horns brayed. Euron's fleet sailing upriver to rescue or avenge. In the sky, faint silhouettes of dragons banked, diving on scorpions crippled by blasts. She reached Mud Gate as panicked small folk surged out. She found wind bloodied, sand missing. The bears hauled a wounded child. They pushed onto a fisher's skiff and pulled from burning quays into Blackwater's oily swell. Dragon shadow swept overhead, flames bathing dark water in molten reflection. Arya watched King's Landing burn, wicked emerald and dragonfire orange mixing into apocalypse twilight. Somewhere inside those fires Cersei's fate sealed itself in stone. They rode downriver through choking ash snow. Before dawn they made shore near ruins of a windmill. Exhausted, Arya slumped onto pebbles, mind blank. Wind asked if Queen dead. Arya answered only, "The city will tell." She did not mention unborn child, nor crater of rubble. She dreamed of heart tree roots tasting wildfire ash, Bran's cryptic words, "Stone that weeps green." It had happened. 2 days later, Jon's army reached the burned outskirts. They expected siege. Instead, they found smoldering silence punctuated by sporadic screams beneath collapsed districts. Dragonfire finished what wildfire began. Scorpion nests twisted ruins. Euron's fleet half sunk by falling debris of Dragonstone caldera, triggered by stray cask blast. The capital fell not to assault, but to its own rot. Jon rode through the shattered gate to find Arya perched atop a wagon, Dirk idly cleaning nails, eyes foreign. He dismounted, scanning carnage. "What happened?" She shrugged. "Lions play with fire. Sometimes den burns." He stared, half angry, half afraid. "Is she alive? I did not see her die." Truth and shield. Jon exhaled, weary. "Then ghosts will haunt this victory." Daenerys landed Drogon amid cracked square. She strode to Jon, gaze sweeping ruin. Tears glittered, but she held them. Her voice fissured. "If this is conquest, I want no throne." But lords arriving behind already knelt, shouting Queen of Ashes or Savior of Realm depending on allegiance. Unrest brewed again, but differently. Jon sensed knives behind kneeling backs. Over the following weeks, they buried dead, broke clandestine plots, fed refugees with grain from Reach. Arya stayed in shadows, listening. She saw how suspicion grew of northern independence, how Unsullied bristled at small folk blamed for firestorm, how Dothraki wanderlust scraped every order. She saw how Gendry, newly forged lord, struggled to mediate but found himself outmaneuvered by veterans of court. One dawn, after council devolved into shouting about lineage and claims, Arya found Jon alone in the old Tower of the Hand, staring south through cracked window. "They will tear us apart," he said. "We killed the dead. We killed the lions. Leaves one enemy. Our own doubts." He sighed. "Or perhaps ourselves." She leaned on sill beside him. "There's a place beyond doubts. The road goes on, faces change, but purpose stays." "What is your purpose now, little sister?" She considered. The faces she'd worn felt like stones in a riverbed, smoothed by passing time yet still themselves. To be no one and someone at once. To keep the cracks open, so light can come in. He smiled wanly. "Then stay. The realm needs light." She shook head. "The realm needs you and your queen to find balance. I would only sharpen edges. My road leads west. New and west of Westeros, where maps stop." A silence full of shared childhood nights filled the room. He drew her into embrace. Stiff, then warm, smelling of smoke and horse. "Then go with every god's blessing, and come back when you've seen what waits." She left that evening. She found Gendry at the smithy, forging nails for rebuilding gates. She teased him for using highborn hands on lowborn work. He laughed, then fell serious, asking to come with her. She kissed him once, tasting salt and soot, then pressed into his palm the black iron coin of Braavos. "Keep it," she whispered. "If I don't return, send for my face." He did not understand but closed fingers tight. Wind rode north with northern columns. Sand's fate remained rumor of bones in wildfire. The Bear Islanders carried stories home, of a lone wolf setting the capital ablaze. In quiet hours, bards began singing ballads of the green rain and the phantom of faces. Arya boarded a sleek Braavos sloop at dusk, trading stolen alchemist token for passage. As the prow slipped beyond the mouth of the Blackwater, She stood on deck, wind-tangling hair newly chopped to chin. Behind, King's Landing flickered with 1,000 lanterns perched on scaffold crags, desperate to mimic starlight snuffed by smoke. She whispered goodbye to brothers and sisters living and dead, to father's grave words, to mother's soft lullabies, to all the ghosts that packed her heart. Then she turned west, toward sunset's crimson road. The many-faced god might wait anywhere, but so might a world wide and undiscovered, where she could be simply a woman with a sword and a story, cracks and all. Night fell. Stars emerged, new constellations free of old omen. She traced them with finger, naming them for wolves that howled across endless snow and dragons that soared over silent seas. On the horizon, the last glow of wildfire winked out, and the dark became possibility. She breathed deep salt air, felt the deck's pulse thrum beneath, and let the unknown carry her forward, face unmasked, eyes open to whatever lay beyond the edge of all maps. Moonless waves heaved beneath the Braavos sloop, their swells flecked with ghostly fire, as schools of tiny crustaceans flashed blue-green in the vessel's turbulent wake. The ship's single topsail strained under a westerly gust, canvas groaning like the bones of a long-dead leviathan. Arya Stark, daughter of Winterfell, once no one, now a woman chasing the edge of every map, leaned against the starboard rail and listened to the wooden hull converse with the sea in creaks and sighs. Fresh salt stung her cheeks, and each breath tasted of open promise rather than smoke or blood. Here at last, the ghosts grew quiet. None of them knew these waters, and so they did not know the future. The Braavosi captain, a spare man named Tommaso Voren, had taken her coin with a shrug and no further questions. He cared little for passengers beyond payment, though rumor among the crew claimed Voren once steered spice galleys through summer sea storms that sank kings. Tommaso's vessel, the Mira, a graceful caravel built in the Golden Isles, cut the swells with the ease of a herring. Its crew of 20 hailed from half a dozen free cities, but all shared the rolling gait of blue-water sailors and the superstition that west, beyond wind charts, lurked edges where the ocean poured off the world like a cataract into void. Most nights they huddled under the poop lanterns, whispering prayers to Rhoyne River maidens, or the many-faced god, depending on whose courage faltered first as darkness swallowed all sense of distance. Arya listened while mending her worn riding leathers with needle and gut thread. When the sailors noticed, they laughed at her tidily looped stitches, yet said nothing of the slender Valyrian blade hidden at her hip. The glint of northern steel carried its own persuasion. "We'll sail 7 days clear," Tommaso said on the first dawn. They lost sight of Westeros cliffs, then heaved to at midnight and offer wine to the drowned god. "After that we tack with every westerly, and if the fates guide us, we glimpse a land no man has charted." His grin revealed 2 teeth capped in ivory. "Or we circle until hunger names us fools." Arya answered with a grin to match. "Wolves eat fools." He smirked. But they do not eat iron men drunk on fortune." Each morning, Arya awoke in the cramped officer's berth Cassari had bribed on her behalf. Little more than 3 planks' breadth of floorboards, a low hammock, and a porthole no larger than a child's fist. Yet in that threadbare space she felt lighter than in Winterfell's stone towers, lighter even than she had felt under Braavos' marble vaults. The sea's lullaby replaced the temple chant that had once drilled itself into her bones. The faces that chased her through dream corridors faded each dawn like mist, leaving flickers of memory without bite. Her new companions accepted her as a blade for hire, though more than one mariner snuck appraising looks at the sigil burned onto the butt of Needle's hilt. She offered no stories. If pressed, she said only that she had stolen a sword from the dead, and now sought a place too distant for their vengeance to follow. The sailors respected the answer. Every man aboard bore scars from different ghosts. On the 10th night, a storm atomized the horizon. Lightning exposed clouds layered like black granite cliffs hanging upside down, and thunder rolled so closely on each flash, it sounded like a single unending roar. Rain fell sideways, sheeting across the deck in icy knives. Arya lashed herself to the mizzen shrouds beside young Brulik, a Taroshi lad with mismatched eyes who trembled at every flare. She showed him how to keep breathing slow, how to count heartbeats between lightning and thunder, to know the storm's center. When a mast-top yardarm cracked, crashing onto the forecastle, she and 3 sailors heaved it overboard before shattered spars could gouge the hull. Tommaso stood at the wheel, feet braced wide, cursing Lavara the sea bitch and laughing as if storm spit were kisses. He banked the Mira into waves so steep, the prow seemed to climb midnight mountains. Twice they nearly broached. Twice he flogged the helm and bullied the caravel back on line. Arya's stomach churned, but she swallowed bile and gripped rope until her palms bled. When dawn pried open an exhausted sky, the storm lay spent behind them, tattered clouds trailing violet curtains toward the east. Below decks, the sailors passed barley grog and cured eel. Arya drank sparingly, though salt fire in her veins begged for more. Tommaso slumped at the mess table, hair dripping, beard hung with seaweed, but his grin lacked none of last night's reckless delight. "No storm yet born can drown the Mira," he declared, slapping the oak tabletop. "But we lost our top gallant. When next calm seas hold, we rig a spare. Until then, pray the wind favors our patched wings." "No. You ride storms like Dothraki ride horses," Arya told him. Tommaso chuckled. "Horses bite. Waves only test you." His gaze softened. "You handled lines well. You a sailor's daughter." She shook her head. "Daughter of winter and wolves." Another day passed, then another. Stars brightened overhead until they looked close enough to pluck. The black water glowed where oars disturbed plankton. Each dusk Arya joined a deck watch to stretch limbs and keep blade work practiced. 300 cuts, 300 parries, her own private prayer. Some nights Brulik attempted the footwork she displayed, stumbling over coils of rope. She corrected his stance, remembering Sirio's patient taps with a reed. Teaching calmed her, anchored her memories in kindness rather than steel. On the 15th night, lookouts spotted a glimmer on the western horizon. A pale band like moonlit sand, even though the moon itself slept under thick cloud. Tommaso ordered lanterns hooded. The crew clustered along the rail, whispering. Through the captain's brass spyglass, Arya saw jagged silhouettes rising from sea haze, low but distinct, not cloud, not rolling wave tops. Land died. Murmurs spread. A new continent? An island chain? A mirage fashioned by weary eyes? Tommaso refused speculation. "Course is west by south until we make anchor," he said. "Every man keep your wits." They reached calmer water before dawn. Seabirds wheeled overhead, black-eyed and broad-winged, unfamiliar to any handbook Tommaso had studied. Their screams sounded like oiled hinges creaking under weight. By morning light, the coastline emerged clear. Cliffs carved in pale honey-colored stone, ridge upon ridge, with narrow beaches of ash-gray sand between headlands. Inland, smoke rose from somewhere beyond view, thin gray threads lost among clouds. Tommaso turned to Arya. "A scouting party will row ashore. If gods measure time in irony, we may dine in some savage kettle. I need a sword that keeps its wits." She nodded. "I row faster than I dine." So the longboat launched, carrying Tommaso, Arya, Brulik, and 2 others. Galfor, a heavy-set Pantoshi crossbowman, and Murta, a Lyseni quartermaster, whose sharp tongue could quarter a man quicker than a hatchet. They pulled through curling surf, stowed the skiff behind rocks, and slogged onto the gray beach. Each footstep stirred a faint hiss as sand collapsed into hidden air pockets. Closer inspection revealed that beach grains were not sand at all, but pulverized shell fragments, each piece the color of weathered bone. Where waves retreated, the foamy water took on a faint pink tinge. A mineral? Or something within the shell dust? Tommaso crouched, tasting a pinch on his tongue. He spat. "Copper," he said. "Strange." Arya knelt beside a tide pool. Inside, bright cerulean starfish clung to rocks, each with 7 arms instead of 5. Their tiny suckers pulsed in rhythms matching the distant surf. When she extended a finger, one arm coiled languidly toward the shadow before slipping away like wary cat. Beyond the tide rack the cliffs rose abruptly. 60 feet perhaps. A narrow gully cut a jagged path inland. Sparse tufts of reed-like grass tufted the slopes, color somewhere between blue and emerald. No birds perched, only the sky-wheeling black gulls kept watch. They climbed, leaving Marta to guard the skiff. Brulix and Arya scouted ahead, blades ready. The path twisted between chalky walls scattered with fossils. Spiral shells bigger than wagon wheels, impressions of fish with jaws like saws. At the bluff's crest they halted. A plateau stretched beyond, draped in a forest of peculiar trees, trunks slender and silver, bark dappled as birch, but their crowns unfurled into fan-shaped leaves large as sails, streaked with crimson veins. Wind rippled through, making hushed percussion like distant drums. Shafts of sunlight speared the canopy, revealing motes of iridescent dust drifting between trunks. Galfor muttered a prayer to the warrior. Brulix swallowed audibly. Tommaso's narrowed eyes belonged to a man balancing fear and fascination. "Mark the sky," he said softly. They lifted gazes. Above the treetops spiraled three shapes, creatures of wings and long sinuous tails. Smaller than dragons but larger than any bird, Arya knew. Wing membranes shimmered between turquoise and burnt umber. They glided on thermals, occasionally diving to snatch something invisible from treetop. "Harpies," Galfor whispered. "It is said they guard islands off Basilisk Point, but we sailed far north." "Far north indeed," Tommaso answered. "Either legends misdrew their borders, or we proved them fools." They descended again, skirting the forest edge. Arya felt tension coil like a drawn bowstring. The air smelled faintly of resin mixed with a sweeter undertone, reminiscent of pine and lilac merging. Insects hummed low notes, nearly subsonic, tickling chest bones. She heard her own heartbeat syncopate with unknown thrums. The place felt less wild than waiting. They crossed a clearing where a shallow stream wound through violet reeds. Here they found prints. Three-toed hind feet, each toe clawed like sickle. Strides suggesting a creature of feline grace, yet weight heavy enough to impress inch deep. Several prints overlapped heading toward the forest, their age difficult to gauge. Tommaso knelt to trace one. "We should return," he said. "We need more men, more arms." Brulix glanced around nervously. "Captain, what if we bring the ship closer? Anchor in that bay south of cliffs." "Too risky without soundings," Myrta cut in. She had caught up, huffing. "Rock spines could gut our holdfast." Arya stated simply, "We'll learn nothing at sea." She glanced inland. "1 more hour." Tommaso exhaled. 1 hour. Move quiet. Dimmed. They slipped among silver trunks, boots treading on spongy moss, emitting faint blue sparks under pressure. Phosphorescent spores, perhaps. The harpy shapes overhead screeched once, but did not dive. Arya kept needle loose in scabbard, senses drinking the alien blend of colors, sounds, scents. She felt no fear, only heightened readiness. As before each turning point of her life. Suddenly Galfor hissed. He pointed. Ahead, half shrouded by bracken, stood a structure. Stone blocks stacked into a low circular wall, younger than weathering suggested, perhaps built within a decade. The design recalled Valyrian mortar techniques. Bricks interlocked with fused seams. Rapid breathing sounded among the group. They approached. Within the ring stood an obelisk of dark basalt, carved with glyphs similar to those Arya had seen in Old Town sketches of lost Asshai, but sharper, as if etched last month. At the obelisk's foot lay a shallow bowl where water gathered from last night's rain. The water glowed faintly violet. Tommaso raised a hesitant palm. "Do not touch." Arya stepped closer anyway. The glyphs pulsed once. She might have imagined it. No energy, no sound. But the hair on her forearms prickled. She traced an inch-high spiral with her gaze, noting how its tail curved into a sigil shaped like 3 eyes in a vertical line. She knew nothing of such runes, yet they tugged at memory, as though Bran's raven whispers brushed her thoughts. Brulix whispered, "Captain, look." He pointed at a smaller stone set in the earth behind the obelisk. Upon it rested a stick figure carved in bas-relief, arms upraised toward 3 stars. At its feet, an arrow pointed east. Tommaso exhaled. Someone expects pilgrims. Arya wet her lips. Or sentinels. Golfer's boot nudged a patch of moss, revealing another stone. He crouched to pry it loose. Beneath lay a pit lined with polished metal. Within the pit, 3 eggs rested. Mottled silver, green-black, and reddish bronze, each the size of a child's skull. Their shells bore filigree lines echoing the obelisk glyphs. Everyone stared. Brulich whispered, "Dragons." Arya shook her head slowly. "Too small for dragons. Wyverns, harpies, basilisks," Tommaso murmured. "Or nothing at all." Myrta's voice came taut. "We leave them. We speak first to God's wood priests, or maesters. We are not egg thieves." "Man." Arya stepped back, the ancient instinct to pocket valuable objects battling the learned caution that magical eggs rarely birthed gentle things. Yet some thread of destiny twanged at the sight. She thought of Daenerys, mother of dragons, and of Bran's talk of deeper powers still coiled beneath the world's skin. Here might be another coil. Then the bushes rustled. A shape exploded from undergrowth, sleek as a lion, scaled like a lizard, jade eyes aglow. It bounded between trees, jaws lined with serrated teeth. Brulich screamed. And Golfer lifted crossbow, but the beast hit him sideways. Claws tearing chest. Galfor fell gurgling. Tommaso slashed with cutlass, scoring hide. The beast roared, sound weirdly melodic, like a flute. Arya darted left, drawing needle in one hand, a throwing knife in the other. The creature pivoted toward her, tail barbed with bone spurs. It coiled and lashed. She ducked behind trunk, spurs splintering bark. Tommaso charged again, blade seeking neck. The beast leapt away to face him. Arya seized chance. She hurled knife, it buried in flank. The beast hissed, whirling. Tommaso's cut parted its hindquarter. Brulich stabbed with spear haft improvised from a broken limb. Finally, needle slipped between ribs. Arya felt cartilage part. Warm blood sprayed, smelling oddly of citrus. The creature's eyes dimmed, and it collapsed, tail shuddering in spasms. Silence descended, but for Galfer's ragged breaths. He bled heavily. Myrta knelt, tearing tunic for bandage. Arya pressed cloth to chest gash. Galfer stared wide-eyed, lips moving. She lowered ear. He whispered, "I saw." Statue move, and then eyes glazed. She eased lid shut. Tommaso sheathed cutlass with shaking hands. "We leave now." No one argued. They wrapped Galfer's body in cloak, hefted him between poles, and retreated along path. The harpies circling overhead screeched louder now, perhaps summoned by blood scent. Arya felt gaze of unseen watchers between trunks. Every hiss of wind tasted predatory. They reached cliff edge at dusk. Myrta signaled the ship with mirror flash. Brulich retched over rocks, tears streaming. Tommaso wiped blood off blade, face tight. "We sail at first star rise," he said. "But we logged this chart. Others will come, perhaps with maesters' spells, unsullied phalanxes." Then Trudder. Arya knelt by wrapped body. She remembered every stranger fallen beside her. Sand Sisters, a named phrase. Faceless enemy who died not knowing her name. She whispered the Old North prayer. "Now your watch is ended. May summer grass grow where you laid down." She plucked 2 leaves from nearest silver tree and tucked them under Galfer's cloak. That night they pushed through surf. As the Mira raised anchor, a strange luminescence blossomed on cliffside. Lines of runes mirrored the obelisk script, glowing blue like ice. They pulsed thrice, then faded. Tommaso pointed silently. Arya set hand on rail, feeling wood tremble under cold wind. She sensed again that waiting presence, in neither hostile nor kind, simply aware. The Mira sailed southwest now, hugging newfound coast at safe distance. Shores alternated between towering cliffs and river deltas, where mangrove-like roots gripped black mud. They saw no human settlements, yet smoke rose from inland valleys. 3 days south, the coast bent away. Tommaso chose open sea once more. Brulich's nightmares grew loud. He muttered of scaled women whispering beneath waterline, promising gold. Arya awoke one dawn to find him missing. His boots stood at bow, laces undone. A single splash had woken no one. The sea kept its secrets. Grief weighed crew, but determination tempered. Myrta retraced dragon shell sketches nightly, obsessing over potential markets for such eggs. Tommaso listened, expression unreadable. Arya sharpened needle each dusk, feeling edges align with her own questions. Had she truly left Westeros, or merely stepped onto another page of the same story? Could any traveler outrun the gods' board? Weeks rolled. Storms bruised sails. Then perfect calms turned canvas slack, forcing oars. Food stores dwindled, but shoals of silver-green fish leapt near hull, easy spearing. Fresh water poured from mists condensing on upper sails each dawn, as though unseen hands favored them. Sailors grew superstitious. Some claimed a silver-eyed mermaid followed stern, steering luck. One starlit night, Arya climbed a crow's nest to breathe isolation. Above, constellations twisted, shapes she could not name. She thought of Jon fighting feuds in burned capital, Bran seeing with weirwood eyes beyond mortal horizons, Sansa weaving alliances in old eerie halls. She wondered if they glimpsed same stars, and felt the thread linking them. She reached into pocket, felt iron Braavosi coin still warm against palm. In its weight, she sensed no god, only choice. Below, deck watch called softly. Something large glided under Mira's keel, swirling phosphorescence like comet tail. It surfaced. A massive whale shark creature mottled gold and white, barnacle-encrusted mouth wide as cargo door. It rolled, revealing scars across flank, then dove trailing a rainbow of plankton glow. Tommaso joined Arya aloft to watch. "If there's one," he whispered, "there's an ocean of them." Dawn broke on a horizon dotted by irregular shapes. Archipelagos, perhaps, or reefs. The water turned turquoise, bottom visible 20 fathoms. Coral towers reached like cathedrals. Fish darted, scales flashing. Tommaso steered closer, depth sounding each lead. They discovered a lagoon encircled by atoll rings, where water shimmered pale rose, tinted by the same crushed shell dust as first shore. The crew anchored and rowed to tiny sandspit crowned with spiral conch shells bigger than a man's torso. Inside one shell, Arya found pearls soft as candle wax, needing only touch to crack skins and release lilac fragrance. These wonders hushed sailors into reverence. Farther inland, the atoll's narrow land tongue led to a copse of stubby trees, bearing blue fruit shaped like hearts. Arya plucked one, slit skin. Sweet juice glowed, tingling where it touched tongue, imparting warmth despite cool breeze. Myrta gathered basketfuls, planning to graft seedlings in Essos. But the greatest marvel rose in lagoon's center. A circular stone dais half submerged, carved of same fused Valyrian masonry. Upon it stood dozens of pillars supporting a lattice of translucent crystal panels, broken in places but still whispering when wind found their edges, producing a polyphonic hum. At midday sun, the panels refracted light into radiant beams that danced across water, shimmering like living rainbows on sails. Here Tommaso decided to leave a record. He disembarked with sextant and parchment, plotting coordinates using stars and new sun path. Arya helped inscribe the Mira's name on basalt. First of the free currents, 344 AC, Westeros. She carved below with needle's tip, Arya of winter and beyond. That night, they feasted on blue fruit and grilled fish. Tommaso poured last of Braavosi brandy in Galfor's honor. Then for Brulik, for all unknown dead. Arya swallowed the fiery liquid and felt tears prick. She let them fall quietly. Weeks lengthened to months, measured only by moon cycles. Land snagged horizon occasionally, a volcanic cone belching saffron smoke, a snow-capped range glimpsed then gone behind fog. They charted each, naming peaks for crew lost. Mount Galfor, Cape Brulich, the empty steppes. They repaired sails with woven reed fiber from new islands, patched hull with coral resin that hardened like steel. Each edition transformed Mira into hybrid born of worlds old and new. Time blurred stories into myth. Tommaso dreamt aloud of founding a free port where no slaver dared sail, where women and men shed names and chose new ones under starlight. Myrta argued for trading posts and spice routes. Others whispered of gold rivers glimpsed inland, of city ruins hidden in vines waiting to reveal histories older than Valyria. One twilight, when sky peeled orange and indigo, Arya walked stem to stern breathing salt and thinking of home. She pictured Winterfell in summer, wolves napping under weirwood's shade, Sansa's laughter spilling out of solar windows. She realized she no longer sensed the temple's invisible chain around her ribs. The faces carved in vault were behind her, but the lessons endured like her own bones. Death has many faces, and so does life. She stood at bow carving a small wolf figurine from driftwood. Footsteps approached. Tommaso. He carried rolled parchment. "Quartermaster Myrta wants shore again tomorrow," he said, voice softer than usual. "We spotted smoke to leeward, perhaps islanders." Arya nodded. "We parley or pass. Depends on whether they bear spears or songs." He held parchment out. "But this is yours." She unrolled it, a map sketch showing their trail from Westeros across blank seas, dotted with islands newly penciled. At paper's western edge, Tommaso had inked a dashed line carrying forward beyond current knowledge, ending in a drawn wolf silhouette. "I'm content to rest here, build trade lane back east," he said. "But your line keeps going. Take a longboat, provisions, the Mira stays behind as home port." She stared, heart thumping. "Alone? Or whoever volunteers?" He glanced back where crew lounged under masked lanterns, faces weary. "Some believe in edges, you believe in openings. Take the map. Open more." Nights. That night she gathered pack. Water cask, smoked fish, coil of rope, flint steel, a spare sailcloth, half basket of blue fruit, and of course needle. Myrta pressed on her a small cask of fermented sap, for barter or courage. Two sailors, Kesh from Norvis and Arya from Qohor, joined, saying they'd follow any captain who chased sunrise backwards. Before dawn, Mira's longboat slid into silky water. The crew bid farewell with conch horn call that shivered twin echoes across lagoon pillars. Tommaso raised lantern, his grin a star in gloom. Arya returned salute, then set oars with her small company. They passed through Coral Gate, cleared reef teeth, and let current take them west. The boat's square sail snapped pregnant with breeze. Kesh hummed old Valyrian sea chanties. Arya charted sun's climb with makeshift quadrant. Arya sat at tiller feeling keel answer new pulses. 3 days saw calm seas putty smooth. On fourth dawn, a fog bank swallowed sun. They rowed until arms numbed. Midday shone ghostly through gray swirl, illuminating silhouettes of towering spires jutting from water, some natural rocks, others perhaps vessel masts petrified by salt. All silent. While Kesh probed depths with pole, Arya peered over gunwale. Water clear to infinite depth, but shapes drifted in gloom. Ruined columns encrusted with coral, mosaic tiles glinting, statues toppled on silt. She realized they sailed above a drowned city. Arya whispered a prayer. As fog thinned, a isle emerged, steep cliffs carved into terraces bearing colonnades and crumbling steps leading to broken temple dome. Ivory gulls perched atop cracked friezes. Mangrove roots strangled archways. The longboat beached on pebbled shore. Underfoot, stones bore faint inscriptions akin to obelisk script, but worn by tide. They explored narrow streets where vines threaded mosaic courtyards. Murals along walls depicted serpents with wings and humans dancing beneath triple moons. In Central Plaza rose a throne carved from single basalt block, shaped like open jaws. On its seat lay a crystal dagger, faintly humming. Arya touched pommel, cold but not lifeless, as if waiting for question. She left it. Deeper inside temple remnants, they found library alcoves, piled with stone tablets etched in glyph spirals. Some cracked, some intact. Arya marveled at each, copying rubbings. Kesh discovered sealed urns containing iridescent dust that glowed when breathed on. At dusk, They camped under collapsed dome. Arya's streams churned. Wolves howling across desert of broken obelisks. Dragons smaller than cats perched on her shoulders whispering riddles. A man with 3 eyes gazing across infinite sea calling her name. She awoke before dawn, heart racing. She ascended ridge path to watch sunrise. Mist clung to water, parted in iridescent ribbons when warm light poured. And there, far on horizon, she saw land again. Mountain peaks like sleeping giants, their tops aflame rose gold. Returning to camp, she shared sight. Kesh clapped hands, eager. Arya insisted they finish rubbings. She promised work quick. They launched boat by midday, loaded with tablets and unknowns. The following week tested will. Storms, sudden heat waves, odd tides pulling east instead of west. Yet every starry night the distant peaks grew sharper. On 9th day, they reached a river mouth wide as Blackwater Bay. Current drew them inland, flanked by reed banks where emerald herons stalked silver beetles. Towering trees bearing crystal fruit arched overhead, forming cathedral canopy alive with luminescent moths. Finally, the river opened into lake reflecting mountain ring. A caldera so vast the longboat's wake barely rippled surface. In center of lake rose a pier of obsidian blocks, leading to island crowned by stepped pyramid, fused from black glass. Wind blew warm, smelling of cinnamon and thunder. Kesh murmured something about fire mages' tales. Arya's eyes widened. Arya felt hush inside chest. Here stood the heart of this new world, or one of its hearts, pulsing with memory older than Westeros stones. She anchored boat against pillar. On island shore, they found stone walkway lit by bowls, where coals smoldered though no living keeper tended. The pyramid's entrance gaped like mouth of dragon, doors decorated with mosaic of 12-pointed star around swirling vortex. Arya touched threshold. Glyphs shimmered, reading her presence as key. Inside, a hall soared, walls veined with veins of ruby quartz. Light spilled from fissures overhead though clouds obscured sun. Along walls stretched murals depicting shifting scenes as one walked. First ice, engulfing world, then fire scourging ice, then waves swallowing fire. Finally a wolf silhouette stood before tricolored dragons amid flowering trees. Glyphs below changed as she read them, forming Westerosi script for heartbeat. All faces flow into one river. She blinked and they became unknown again. At center of hall sat crystalline console like frozen water. On its surface a star map glowed, showing constellations shifting as if nights passed in moments. Kesh reached to touch but Arya stopped him. Wait. She placed iron Braavosi coin on console. Light leaped, swirling into image of planet spheres orbiting 3 suns. The outermost sphere bore mark of 7-pointed star, the faith of the 7, then splintered into shards which floated toward image of direwolf. She pulled coin away. Light faded. Arya whispered, "This is place of seers." Arya thought of Bran perched in Godswood, sight stretching beyond time. Perhaps seeds of his power rooted here, in some ancient pact between world veins. A staircase spiraled downward. They descended into a hall, lined with niches. Within each rested a face carved of obsidian. Men, women, children, creatures with serpentine forms, others winged. Some resembled wights she fought, others resembled harpies. The many-faced gods vault but writ in stone. In last niche, Arya found blank face, an uncarved mask. She lifted it, weightless yet solid. She pressed it to her skin instinctively. At once visions flooded. She stood upon cliffs of dragonstone as dragons hatched. She knelt in Godswood while children of forest carved faces. She soared above seas chasing ironborn raiders. She sat in council of maesters pondering doom. Each vision flickered like candle glimpsed through stormglass, then coalesced into her own reflection, eyes bright. Features neither hardened by vengeance nor hidden by illusions but honest. She pushed mask away. It remained blank. She understood. Its only purpose was to show each wearer the truth of themselves. Kesh and Arya watched, awed. Arya placed mask back, bowing slightly. She had no need to carry it. She carried truth enough. They returned to surface. Sunset painted sky violet, casting pyramid into silhouette of knife edge. Arya stood on pier, breathing. She felt 100 paths stretch. Explore further, write volumes of new lands, sail home to Sansa with proof that hope outlived horror. Perhaps bring Daenerys' prophets to new healing ground. But another path glimmered beyond, deeper west still, where maps might reveal lands of silver plains or storms that sang. Purpose discovered grew not from destination but from journey itself. From cracks letting horizon expand. She turned to companions. "Tomorrow we sail again," she said. "But first we rest." Adja exhaled relief. Kesh grinned. They built campfire of driftwood, roasting river fish, seasoned with crystal fruit. As they ate, distant mountains rumbled. Thunder or something waking. Stars blossomed overhead, constellations unrecorded. Arya traced them with fingertip, naming shapes: the needle, the dancing wolf, the shattered mask. Each name she spoke out loud, anchored memory into world. Just before sleep claimed her, she whispered vow to night breeze. "No longer chase the edge, I will weave it. My map flames with living lines. Wherever I tread, I leave light in the cracks." She dreamed of Jon smiling from Iron Gate porch, of Sansa reading letters describing fruit blue as sky, of Bran nodding as ravens carried news that the world indeed had no walls. The many-faced god observed from distance, no longer ledger-keeper but silent guide. Dawn rose gold-green, spilling across pyramid like molten spring. Arya woke, stretched, and felt the unknown call again, gentle yet unstoppable as tide. She tightened boots, sheathed needle, and laughed. A full laugh unburdened by grief or duty. The longboat pushed off. Wind unfurled sail. Behind pyramid shimmered then faded into morning mist. Ahead lay blank sea bursting with possibility. Arya Stark gripped tiller, gaze fixed westward. For once she traveled not to flee death, nor hunt vengeance, nor serve faceless gods, but to live wide enough for every face she had ever worn. And as water flashed diamond under rising sun, she knew the story would stretch far beyond 5 hours, far beyond any scribe's tally, written instead in each horizon she reached, each name she chose to weave into dawn.